Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Return to 10 Forward. I am one of the co-hosts of Welcome to 10 Forward, which was a show that we started 2 years ago, and then I sort of let it lapse for a year, but god damn, I want to talk Star Trek, man, because I love Star Trek. I love everything that has to do with Star Trek up until 2004. And joining me is my co-host. My co-host here is Jim Frasca. Jim Frasca, introduce yourself, my good sir.
Well, as you could tell, my name is James. There it is. Thank you. I'm a lieutenant commander. I also happen to like Star Trek, and I have a completely different mindset when it comes to Star Trek. Typically, even though Adam is the one that got me into Star Trek, there are things that I like that are different than Adam. But overall, I tend to agree. I like pretty much all things Star Trek. Not a super fan of the more modern stuff, but I do like some of it. So yeah, I am excited to start talking Star Trek. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, Jim, I hate everything New Trek.
Yeah, I know.
I hate it. I hate it.
I know you do.
To put it in no uncertain terms. So usually what we do on this show is we don't talk about New Trek. Even though that's one of the first things we're going to be talking about this year, or in this season, anyways, is something that happened with New Trek.
Yeah, so something happened with New Trek right after they said, "Hey, we're not going to talk about this anymore."
Yep.
And now we're talking about it.
And now we're talking about it. We'll get into the actual episode a little bit later because what this is essentially we're going to be doing here the first 4 episodes of this new season. So the formatting is going to be a little bit different. We've done this before on ANP where we've gone live and then I kind of converted those into 4 podcast episodes. And we're doing that again here. So the format's going to be a little bit different. Each segment is going to be introduced, or each episode will be introduced by either Jim or myself. I was going to say 2 would be introduced by you today, Jim, probably the 2 episodes that you came up with. And then I was going to do the other 2. It was your idea to do the Section 31 thing, so I think you should rightfully do that. Also, that gives you the opportunity to introduce this new season of Welcome to 10 Forward as well. So, yeah. But, yeah, each one is going to be roughly 30 minutes. I have a timer on my phone that'll go off. We can go a little bit over just because of the natural sake of editing. You're probably going to cut it, cut out about 5 to 10 minutes worth of shit.
Minutes, yeah.
Yeah. Just how
a lot of uhs and ums.
And
what
of
was
them.
that? I don't remember that. What? No, we got to keep
Oh,
those
yeah.
in.
Yeah, we have to look like complete idiots is what we need to do. Are there any Star Trek podcasts, before we kind of get into that, are there any Star Trek podcasts that you like religiously listen to?
I am not a good Trekkie. I watch Star Trek. I love watching Star Trek. In particular, DS9 is my favorite, and I've seen it probably 10 times through now, but I don't listen to any podcasts. I know Gates McFadden does her podcast, Investigates, and I know there was the Delta Flyers had a podcast with the actors that played Harry Kim and Tom Paris from Voyager. And then also, I'm sorry, I did listen to a lot of the podcast episodes from the one that Trip and Reed, the actors that played Trip and Reed from Enterprise, they did a podcast as well a couple of years ago. I did listen to the entire first and second season, but I haven't kept up since then.
See, that's interesting because I have listened to them a little bit. I really liked them early on. There's one episode they did with Jonathan Frakes I really liked.
But I like the one with Tim Russ too.
Yeah, the one with Tim Russ is great. Speaking of Tim Russ, I wanted to talk about him a little bit for Star Trek Section 31 because there's a fan film Section 31 reminds me a lot of, and Tim Russ directed it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Anyways, So this is. Oh, I think I need to fix your split screen for a second. It's like you're. Yeah.
I'm also
It's,
rotating in my chair, so I'm putting
no, no, no,
myself
no, 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 no. Your edges were kind of clipping a little bit. I didn't have you big
the
enough in my
edges.
screen.
No,
Not in the edges.
no. Whoa.
Uh, but yeah, something that Jim, you're very much into the TNG era, which is TNG, DS9, and Voyager,
Yeah.
along with Enterprise. I take it you like Enterprise as well. Um,
It's where have only seen that probably two or three times full through, but yeah,
I
I do enjoy
I
it.
I enjoy Enterprise a great deal. A lot more than I remembered. That's why I really want to rewatch Voyager again full through, because again it's been like probably about 15 years since I last saw Voyager, and I would love to review it. Um, I have not seen Deep Space Nine as many times as you. In fact, I've only seen the show full through, I think, twice.
Oh wow.
Um, However, the nature of what I do for my job, it's on every night. So I always have episodes on in the background. Um, TNG I've seen several times through, but as I've said in other videos, my Star Trek, we joke that it's TOS, hence the shirt. It's not really TOS. My Star Trek will always be the 6 original movies. So the motion picture through the undiscovered countries. To me, that is the best Star Trek anything. Are those 6 movies? Yes, I throw 5 on there. Which is, a bit of a contrast to Jim. Jim, you already said that your favorite of the shows was Deep Space Nine, which I agree. That is
Oh
still
yeah.
my favorite of the show. Even though I love them all in their own ways.
Although, as we will discuss later, I actually just recently finished watching DS9 full through, and normally I would go back and watch Voyager and then start from TNG and watch through again. But instead, this time, my wife has took the leap and trusted me and said, I want to watch Star Trek. So
Mm.
where I'm actually rewatching DS9 for the second time in a row. So I also have not watched Voyager or TNG in probably a year or so now.
Mm-hmm.
Although rewatching, and we'll talk about this later, I say DS9 is my favorite, and it is, but TNG is this close behind. It is really good as well.
Well, that's one of the things. TNG is so iconic. It's like the definitive Trek. Whenever people picture Star Trek, they picture TOS or they picture TNG. Those are the two things
I
that
was
they
gonna
picture.
say you think of Kirk and Spock or you
Yeah,
think of Picard.
yeah,
It's
yes,
it's those two.
yeah,
Those three.
yeah. And having recently, it's weird. I didn't rewatch Star Trek TNG like full through, but I needed something on in the background just to kind of relax me while I was doing other things. And I put
Mhm.
on Star Trek TNG Season 3 because I was like, oh, hey, I remember that being a really good season. And it was. In fact, that's going to be one of the episodes that we do tonight. I'm happy we're doing this again.
Oh, I am too.
I miss talking about Trek. This is like a niche area on my YouTube channel that did moderately well, and I hadn't tapped into it for a while. So we'll see how this does. Just pretty damn excited about it. So again, every episode is going to be roughly 30 minutes long. Everyone is going to be introduced by either James or myself. And then we will talk about it, whatever the topic is, for about a half hour. And of course, one of the great things about Star Trek is that the universe is so vast and there's so many shows that the topics are basically almost endless. So, yeah. So I say, let's fucking do this, Jim. Let's do this.
Watch me botch the first intro.
Well, if you do, we just redo it. That's what live is for. Let me open up. We're going to do the Section 31 review first.
Oh, you spoiled it. No, it's already in the description.
It is. Yeah. Well, Jim, I'm going to pull you up full screen. Take it away, my friend.
I gotta say, I look pretty good. I think I'm pretty proud of my
Yeah,
lighting. I
you
went on a
yeah,
diet.
you look
Lost like
fucking.
20
Oh
pounds.
wait, before we do that, Jim, didn't you say you had like some shit to show me or something like that? You had some new
Oh,
stuff?
yes. So this is one of my favorite things whenever we used to do 10 forward, because every once in a while I get some more knickknacks and I like to show them off. So for Christmas this year, I specifically asked just for knickknacks to put into my game room. And I got some Halo stuff, but I also got some Star Trek stuff. So I want to start with the thing that is most near and dear to me because, again, DS9 is my favorite. Uh, show, the first thing I want to show off is the unofficial Ferengi Rules of Acquisition
Ah!
written by Quark, Armin Shimmerman, and Ira Stephen Bear.
Fuck yeah.
The entire book, which also is a book, it's like Quark trying to sell you the book,
Which is
is written by
hysterical.
Quark. It's
Yeah.
hysterical. The
That
first like 5
yeah.
pages, hysterical. And then, unfortunately, it's not the complete Ferengi Rules of Acquisition, but it is the 75 that they talked about, that Quark said, or any Ferengi said throughout DS9. So they didn't
It
say all of them, but it's all 75 that they said during the show.
we should really do an episode on the rules of acquisition and go through them because I know they're all listed as many as we know. They're all listed on the Star Trek Memory Alpha, which is a
Yes,
website, and
I will just tell you
it
my
is
my
really
favorite.
funny. It is really funny because some of them overlap because the writers forgot what number they were on. So
Oh yeah.
there's a couple of rules of acquisitions where it might be one or the other. Anyways,
So
Jim, what were you
my
saying?
my favorite rule, or I guess technically it's two rules, is when Cork was talking to Jadzia during like the Dominion War in DS9, and she goes, "Oh, what was it's they're talking about business and how the Dominion War is happening and it's affecting profits." And Jadzia goes, "Ah, yes, rule number 34, war is good for business." And Quark goes, "No, no, 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 no. That's rule number 35. War is good for business." And she goes, "Oh, then what's rule number 34? Rule number 34 is peace is good for business." And those are probably my two favorite rules of acquisition. Peace is good. Peace is good for business. War is good for business. So no matter what, it's good for business.
I'm probably going to have to ruin this for you, Jim.
Oh no, was
I
I
think it's
muted?
I think it's really funny now. I think it's really funny that it's Rule 34.
Ah,
And
yes.
what is Rule 34 when it comes to the internet?
If it exists, there's porn of it.
There's porn of it. Yes. I think that's
I didn't even realize that, but yeah, peace is good for business and war is good for business.
I didn't realize that it was those two rules. But yeah, I agree with you actually. Those are my two favorite things. Yeah, that's
Next
another
up,
thing Deep Space 9
oh,
did. Is Deep Space 9 saved the Ferengi for me. Um
well, I was reading an interview actually of Armin Shimmerman. Armin
mhm.
Shimmerman played the very first Ferengi in
Yep.
I can't remember. It's not a counter at 4 point, is it?
No. No, we
No.
don't see them in that episode, but the very first one is in season 1. And I believe Armin Shimmerman said he
Armin
agreed
Shimmerman played the
Quark.
Ferengi in that episode,
Yeah, and
and
I believe he
he
said
hated it.
he hated it, and I believe he said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he was like, I agreed to play Quark because I wanted to apologize for the Ferengi.
Yeah, and he basically wanted to say like Ferengi are good is a good race to delve into because they really didn't talk about Ferengi, and he blames himself or at the time he blamed himself because he didn't play a good Ferengi. Well, Armin Shimmerman, you definitely played a great Ferengi, so
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
as well as playing one of my favorite video game villains of all time.
Who was that? I know
He
he's
played
in Starfield.
he played Andrew Ryan on the BioShock series.
I didn't know that. He's in
Yeah.
Starfield as well.
I
Uh,
did know that.
he
Yeah.
plays one of the good guys. I have two more items that I would like to show. The first one I think you will appreciate.
Oh.
This is unopened from, uh, I think it's 1994. This is a Star Trek Generations Picard action figure.
Oh my god. You know what? If that No, it doesn't.
Unopened.
Okay.
My
Because
favorite
I
part of
was
this. Oh, go ahead.
does that have the uniform that they rejected from Star Trek Generations that they were going to make?
This does not look like his normal TNG. This looks like an admiral's uniform. It's kind of hard to tell. And
Oh, let me pull it up full screen. It'd help if I did that, didn't it?
on his cuffs um, are the lines like from the original series.
Yes. Oh
So,
my God, Jim, that's big time. Okay, I actually know some history with that.
oh,
Those figures have what was going to be the redesigned uniforms for the movies that they were going to put in Star Trek Generations. However, very late into production of Star Trek Generations, I'm not sure what it was. There's multiple different stories, be it the cast or be it the costume department. No one liked the new uniforms. Nobody liked them. And they couldn't get them quite right. So they were getting down to the nitty gritty of filming the movie. They had to move forward. And instead of saying, screw it, we'll use those uniforms, they just stole the uniforms from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
from Deep Space Nine. And that will relate to this toy, actually, yet again.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the bottom corner here,
Oh, let me pull you up
it
full screen.
says, well, you're not going to be able to read it, but I'll read it. It says, design an alien contest. Win a TV appearance on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay, cool.
So there's a contest that was never entered in this action figure.
Yeah, okay.
That's pretty cool.
It
I
is
kind of want
pretty.
to see if I can submit it.
That's actually really interesting because I was just watching another episode just of talking about that, the uniforms on the rejected uniforms of Star Trek. And there was a huge segment on that for what they were going to do for the movies. And it was just really funny because if you watch Star Trek Generations, and I'll be honest, I didn't notice it until they pointed it out in a separate video from what I was watching. This was a few years ago. And once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. None of the uniforms in Star Trek Generations fit the actors, because they were tailor-made for other people. And I want to say, like, the uniform that Geordi wears is the one that Miles O'Brien was wearing in Deep
No
Space
offense
Nine.
to Miles, but Miles is a little
Is a little bit
chunkier
bigger,
than
a little
LeVar
bit bigger
Burton.
than LeVar Burton. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that was kind of the case. And I think the one that Picard was wearing, ironically, was the one that Cisco was wearing. In Deep Space Nine.
I feel like Avery Brooks is much bigger than Patrick Stewart.
Well, I just find it kind of ironic considering Cisco's opinion of Picard. That's established in the very first episode of
definitely.
Deep Space Nine. Yeah, I think it's kind of
He holds
ironic.
him accountable, yes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of ironic. Even though I know you don't like those uniforms, but I think those uniforms, if they were tailored better, would look great on the TNG cast. But whatever. Yeah, that's just fucking crazy, dude. That's fucking crazy. I wasn't expecting you to show me that. Oh God, that's cool.
I have one more thing that I
All
want to
right,
show.
all right.
This is another thing that I can't open. There's a little bit of a backstory to this. I went to Comic-Con for the very first time last year, and I met Todd Stashwick. I know you don't like New Trek, but he was in Picard season 3, which I think we both agree is at least the
best of it, yes.
Of the new Trek. So that was awesome. And he was super down to earth. And I kept telling my wife, I was like, the only thing that I want to get here while we're here is a Type 1 phaser. That's all I want to get.
Yeah.
There were no Star Trek like selling booths. And I was very disappointed. I was basically the only one wearing a Star Trek uniform. And even though there was multiple Star Trek panels, it didn't do very well. It was all Star Wars and Marvel. Well,
Of
anyway,
course.
my wife took note of that and said, wow, he really wanted a Type 1 phaser. And so again, from 1992, unopened Type 1 phaser.
Ah, one of those. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
somehow, unopened, it still makes noise and lights up.
It's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Can't
This
really
will
hear
never
it
be
here.
open.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Shouldn't be.
Although I want to so bad. I might get another one. You'd be surprised. They're actually not that expensive. You can get an unopened one for about $30 on eBay.
Okay. I didn't know
They're
that.
not that expensive.
Speaking of
So I
that,
might.
I was actually going to bring up those phasers in one of the episodes we were recording today because they got their big redesign in season 3 of TNG, and that's what you have right there. We should do an episode on the weapons of Star Trek.
Oh my goodness,
Like what the different types of phasers and shit that like all the races have and what the Federation has and stuff.
I just watched a great video of there's a YouTube channel that I follow. I think it's Sellsword Arts or Sellswords Online or something like that. Really small channel, but they make like historic videos about like weapons throughout history, and then they'll like spar with them, and it's really cool to see it. But they did an episode on the batleth, and they were like, "We thought this weapon was gonna suck. It's great," and it's
Yeah.
like that's awesome, and
Yeah,
especially
I see the
as
bat'leth and I'm like, that is the most impractical looking weapon I have ever seen. And I guess not.
it's if it was the real design, it would be too heavy at 12 pounds. But if
Yeah.
you thin it out and make it about 6 pounds, it is a very formidable weapon. And that's what they did. They used a plastic version and said if this was the weight of it, this would be a really good one-hand and two-handed weapon.
Wouldn't that be
So
hysterical if the U.S. Army adopts the bat'leth as the 6 pounder? They'll call it the bat'leth carbine because it's instead of 12 pounds, it'd be 6 pounds.
they did a video on I didn't watch the whole thing, but they also did a video on the mechleth, which is that
Ooh,
one-handed like knife thing. And
yes.
they said that's an even better, more realistic weapon.
Well, wait, is that the
For
one where they press the button and the two things come out of the side of it?
No, no, it's a sword, but it kind of looks like a hatchet, and
Oh,
then
that
there's a
one.
guard. Yeah, that's
Yes.
the
Okay.
mechleth. Um,
Well, granted, those knives were based off of the Arabian swords. So
yes,
I'm like,
yes, they
those were
were.
already good swords. So I'm like, all right.
And that's why they're like, this is totally a real weapon. It's just slightly changed to make it look a little more sci-fi, but in
Mm.
practicality, it's basically, yeah, just that Arabian weapon.
I think it's really funny how you really like those Type 1 phasers. I like them when they started putting them in like the rifle.
Oh,
That
that's not my favorite fight phaser. I
I'm
personally,
sorry.
I personally like the Enterprise phasers and the
Oh,
Bajoran
those.
phasers.
I My favorite will always be the one from the TNG, not the TNG, sorry, the TOS films from Wrath of Khan through the
And I think
Undiscovered
that's why I
Country.
like the Enterprise ones because I think there's like the Enterprise ones are not obviously the same because it's like 100 years earlier,
Right.
but you can see it's a natural evolution. And that's one of the things I do like about Enterprise is even if the story's not always great, everything that they do in that show is none of it like oversteps TOS, even though
Oh yeah, yeah.
like I really like that,
I really like
like
the lead.
technology wise.
Yeah, if there's one thing, in my humble opinion, that Enterprise did and did extremely well, it was the aesthetics of the show from beginning to end.
The
Um,
submarine, yeah,
yeah, making the Enterprise
making it
feel more
look
like
like
you're
a
on a
sub.
submarine.
Yeah.
Fucking genius decision. And well, they copied that from what Nicholas Meyer did in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and then we'll actually get into our show, I promise. Um, in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, Nicholas Meyer watched Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He directed and wrote Star Trek II. And he hated how in the motion picture the Enterprise, the interiors looked so big and spacious. He hated that. And he said, no, I'm going to make it feel like a submarine. And you really feel that in Star Trek II. Star Trek
Oh
II
yeah.
especially in Star Trek II, the Wrath of Khan, that this feels like a warship. This feels like a battleship, which actually is what the Enterprise was designed for in one of the Klingon wars that the Federation got themselves into. That Constitution class, I believe it was Constitution class starship, was actually designed to combat either the D6 or the D7 Klingon warships. So yeah. I thought that was just really cool, and I agree with that decision too. I believe there's actually a really good middle ground that you can go on in terms of making your ship feel like a submarine versus a spacious, luscious thing that we get in, the motion picture, or we really get it in
TNG.
TNG, yeah, but it fits in TNG because well, hold on. What is the class that the Enterprise D is?
I'm awful with the ship classes. I just remember while you're looking that up, when the episode where Scotty shows up on the Enterprise D and
Galaxy
he's like,
class.
I don't want no bloody A, B, C, D. I just want the Enterprise.
There
and he's like, this
driver.
is too spacious.
Yes.
This is supposed to be, a military ship.
Mm-hmm.
Why are there families on here and all of that stuff? And it's like, but if you're going to be on this ship for 5-10 years and not go back to Earth, it makes sense.
It does make sense,
yeah. At the end of the day, they're not warships. They are the flagship, but they're exploration ships. They're not warships. Until my favorite. I was going to grab my figure, but I don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, notice how they make the aesthetics of the Defiant.
It's again more cramped.
Yeah.
Because it's not a leisure ship.
Yeah, they made it look kind of like a destroyer more than anything else. That's what I always found fascinating about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, is that the budget for that film was so low they just wound up reusing all the sets from the motion picture. There's not one new set really for the vast majority of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Even Khan's ship is just redressed Enterprise sets. And just through lighting and camera angles, how different they made it look. And
especially considering how it looked in the motion picture compared to Wrath of Khan. Yeah. I think even when we watched both of them, I think I asked you if that was a different set, because it really does look completely different, but no, it's not.
Yeah, and I think they gave it a slightly darker paint job. They made it look a little more like it was steel, because if you watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture, it's very bright, very purposefully so. Even though I think it looks great in the motion picture. That's still my favorite Star Trek ship anything, is the refit of the original Enterprise, NCC 1701. So... Anyways, Jim, enough rambling. I think we should actually get into this. Christ, that could be an episode in of itself.
We've been going for about 30 minutes, so that's episode 1 done.
Done. There we go. All right, Jim. I'm going to pull you up full screen whenever you're ready. I'll start the timer, and we'll start talking about Section 31.
All right, hello everybody, and welcome to 10 Forward. My name is James. I'm a lieutenant commander on the Enterprise. Today, we are going to be talking about the new movie that just came out, Section 31. Now, just to give a little bit of a backstory, Section 31 takes place in the Discovery universe, which is kind of no longer canon. So why did they put this movie out? Is it worth it? Should you watch it? We're going to talk about that right now. So, Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I hit the wrong button. Goddamn. I pulled up the wrong screen. I was like ready to go, and then nope. Well, Jim, you made me watch this.
It's my fault.
Yes. Yes, Jim. This is all your fault.
I got you to watch New Trek, and it's
You
awful.
got me to watch something New Trek, and it's awful. I don't... For the record, it seems like Alex Kurtzman, who I think is the bane of my existence. I never thought I would hate a producer more than Rick Berman, who did a lot of the TNG era stuff. I don't know. He's a complete disaster. I don't know how he keeps making this crap. This
I got
Jim,
some
this
hot
is
takes.
you got some hot take. All right, Jim, take
I got
yeah.
some
Well,
hot
it's
takes.
you're the host of this show, dude. Just
I
fucking take it
guess
away, man.
I'm just kind of riffing. Let's go. So, did you watch anything that from Discovery?
No. Well, I did. I watched I think half of season 1, and that was
Okay, so
about it.
we're on the same page then. I only watched maybe three-quarters of season one. Um, my very first takeaway was good on Paramount to not put a Klingon in this movie because if they did, everybody would be like, "That's not a Klingon. What
It
is
doesn't
that?"
look like a Klingon. It looks like a fish.
So I guess good on them to have that kind of foresight. If we're going to put out a Star Trek movie and it's going to be big and it's going to have
Hmm.
Michelle Yeoh and we have to put out this movie, don't put a Klingon in it. Good on them for that, at least. My overall opinion is it's not a good movie, but there are pieces I genuinely liked. And I know you're not going to like that.
No.
But hear me out. Hear me out. Let's start with one thing. The overall movie, the overall story, stupid. It really is. You got these two love interests, blah 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 blah. Don't care about that. When you get the hodgepodge crew, I didn't like that. Again, did not like that because, Starfleet Section 31 is supposed to be the best of the best, the gray Jedi, the equivalent of, got to keep balance in the universe and we got to bend some rules if we need to keep that balance. Who are these people? Why are they here? They're a totally hodgepodge misfit crew.
Well, I have something to say to that.
I do
Be-
too. Don't worry.
because that is what drove. That's my biggest problem with the film, is the overall concept of the film. First off, I hate Giorgio. I hate her. I
I
don't
hate
like
her.
the actress. I don't like the actress. I know for some reason everybody likes her, but I think she's a terrible actress. She's
I
awful
disagree.
in this.
I think she's a good actor. I think she's a fine actor, but she's been playing this character for four seasons and now a movie, and
Hmm.
it's an awful character. And I really don't think I can blame her, especially at the end when she was crying when that thing happened. I thought she did a good job.
No,
Now
I.
here's the thing.
Here's what I wanted to say really quick about Section 31. You could make this movie, right? Don't get me wrong. Because clearly what they were going for was a Guardians of the Galaxy Suicide Squad kind of thing, right?
100%.
Here's the thing with both of those movies, right? Or both of those concepts. At least with Suicide Squad, I'm not quite sure with Guardians of the Galaxy because I'm not a big Marvel guy. I'm more of a DC dude myself. But with Suicide Squad, they're called, they are the Suicide Squad. It's not part
Yes.
of a bigger organization. They have been designated the Suicide Squad because they're going on a suicide mission. That's why they're called that. And I don't even know if they actually call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy as like a joke. They do, but it's like they
do.
call themselves that, right?
Correct. No one else calls them that.
No one else calls them that. Calling this film Section 31 is an insult to Section 31 because they are just a part of not even like a sliver of Section 31. They are just one tiny, tiny, tiny cog in a machine. And the thing that really drove me nuts about this is if you really wanted to make a Section 31 film, which I don't think you should, because to me, Section 31, it's like the Borg. The less you know about Section 31, the more terrifying
The more
they are.
intimidating they are.
Yes. And the more you make them like a shadow organization, maybe like the Tal Shiar, for example,
Yep.
the better off they'll be. That's one reason why the Tal Shiar is one of my favorite underground organizations ever, is because of how mysterious they are and how little we know of them. I would not have made this movie like this. I would have made this film very film noir, and I would have made this very much so, and kind of hear me out about this, almost like the Section 31 is the SS of the Federation. Make them really dark, make them unbelievably competent at what they're doing. They are the best of the best, that Starfleet has. They are so good that Starfleet doesn't want them, is how I would look at it, because I would treat Section 31 as they are the most radical they could be in terms of believing what the Federation does, and that's why they're willing to do all this nasty stuff, is because they are so radical in their belief of Starfleet and the Federation. Yeah.
You look at Sloane in DS9, and that is exactly it. And I don't know much about the SS, but like he's wearing an all black uniform and he gets onto the station and under all the security protocols with no problem. But he doesn't like joke about it. He's always serious. And that's what Section 31 needs to be.
They need to be competent and be...
Now, I don't know if you know this. This wasn't supposed to be a movie. This
was
supposed
what I was going to say.
And it is clear as day. And that's what I want to say is a good thing. I don't hate the characters. If these characters were in a different story and they were fleshed out over 2 or 3 seasons, oh my goodness, you might have something there. This is hundreds of years after TNG. What's going on with the Changelings? I didn't hate the Changeling character. I thought he was great. Maybe not great. I have a gripe with the animation, but I thought he was great.
I didn't think this took place. I thought this took place 100 years before TOS.
So it's my understanding that the Discovery crew ends up in like season 2 or 3 getting transported to like 300 years in the future because they're like, oh my goodness, we're destroying all of this established lore. Let's get out of the established lore, and that's how we can break all this lore. So seeing the Changeling, if that's the timeline that we're in and we're 300 years in the future, is he a rogue Changeling? Is he like Odo? Does he know where he's from?
I don't think they cared.
I'm saying I don't hate the idea of that.
This
and
movie
exploring Changelings 200 years in the future after DS9.
This movie is not that, though. This movie takes place 100 years before TOS.
Does it? I thought it took place in the future.
Yeah, there's the little star date at the bottom, and the start date takes place before TOS.
That's the other thing that I didn't get. Like, we're doing all these, not only are we doing flashbacks and time jumps, but we're also doing universe jumps. But Discovery is a universe jump. So it doesn't make any sense to me, and it's extremely hard to follow, especially if you don't know anything Star Trek. I don't hate the character. If he was in a new show and he was on a Federation starship and he just was a character like Yaphet from the Orville, if he was like that, I don't hate that. I think that's a good idea. The character, just wrong movie, wrong overarching story. And the same thing with...
There's so many scenes in this movie where they try to make up for character by making them quirky. And that,
one-dimensional,
to me, is the biggest no-no now in modern writing, is trying to make your characters quirky. Because at least in the Orville, you have all those quirky characters you do. But even in Season 1, which is the weakest of the 3 seasons, they were characters first and foremost, which, that's something that Seth MacFarlane has always done well. Even in early Family Guy, they made his people characters first. And stuff like that. And, well, I have notes. They went relatively chronological order.
I went all over the place and just saying I kept a couple things that I wanted to talk about because I know you're going to point out all the flaws in the movie. I took it as a personal challenge to find the glimmer of hope.
Well,
and
I was going to
one that I will give.
I wanted to ask you, Jim, because you're the cinematographer out of the two of us. Even though I'm now way more into this.
Dude, awful.
Dude,
all of it.
What is the
this,
hell?
1930s France with all the zooming in and ooh.
Oh my god! And there's so many angles. And why was the camera shaking all the time for no reason at all?
All the time and constantly moving.
And it looks nothing like Star Trek. It looks and feels nothing like Star Trek. And it feels... You want to know what this felt like? It felt like a cheap fan film of Star Wars. Or not a cheap fan film, a more expensive fan film of Star Wars. is what this feels like. Uh, and it drove me fucking nuts. It absolutely trying to be. It was like it was trying to forcefully be cool, to
Yes.
be hip with
Yes.
the young people. And I'm like, that's stupid. The whole pub scene, it looks like something from a Quentin Tarantino film that doesn't really fit with Star Trek. And
I don't know about
Old
that.
Star
Wait,
Trek
wait,
didn't
wait, wait.
care about being cool.
Wait,
They
wait, wait,
didn't
wait, wait, wait. We
care.
can't say that the bar scene is not Star Trek. There's a
No,
bar.
it's not
There's a
Star
pen
Trek. It doesn't
forward.
look like Star Trek, Jim. It's not that it's not Star Trek. It doesn't look like Star Trek at all.
I think it's not shot like Star Trek.
It
I
doesn't
I
look like Star Trek.
Another thing that I like though is not especially, but in the bar scene, I liked a lot of the costumes. I
No, I
will give
hated
them
them.
that. No, 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 I think they were all very well thought out, except for the Section 31's S. He looked like Syndrome from The Incredibles. I
Oh
thought
yeah,
he
you
looked
totally
bad.
did. Oh my god, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I
right.
couldn't get that out of my head. I was like, oh, it's Syndrome. Like, what's he doing in Section 31? I didn't hate the costumes. They're not consistent. I will say that. A lot of their hairs like change randomly throughout the movie. Like Starfleet Girl, she has like a bob cut at the beginning, and then throughout the whole movie, she's like a brunette with her hair on her shoulders, and then at the end, again, she's a bob cut, and I'm like, was that the same character, or like what happened with her?
Well, you mentioned that this is supposed to be a full season, kind of condensed into a movie. Um,
Yes.
the thing that I really wanted to bring up is that modern Trek has three tropes. Then this movie checks all of those boxes. Um, the three modern Trek tropes that are in everything Alex Kurtzman touches: revenge, super weapon, laser shooting into the sky. And this
I
film
would not disagree with that.
has all three of those. It's like I don't understand modern Trek's obsession with super weapon. I just don't get it. And they at
It's
least,
because we need to have a villain. We need to have a thing to stop.
well, you can do that, but do it like
Correct.
Deep Space 9.
Or any other Star Trek show. It was
Why is it
so
always a
obvious.
super weapon?
It was so obvious. And I said that too when I actually watched with Jen and Rob, and I said that as soon as I saw that thing, I was like, really? We're going down this route? Like we couldn't come up with anything better than, oh, it's going to destroy the entire universe?
And
And
first, the twist in the film is not a twist at all because you can see it coming a mile away,
a
and that
mile
is
away.
who the villain is.
A mile
However,
away.
um, why does it always need to be revenge? I can tell you why they always do it. And that's because of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan like established just about everything Star Trek. Including you need to have a big baddie, you have to have him wanting to do something that's really bad, and we have to defeat him. And that spirit of revenge.
Yeah, but
Khan wants to kill
Han
Kirk.
is a good, complex character.
Well, it's not just that, but it's also like it hadn't been done very much before in Star Trek at that point. So it was brand new, relatively brand new. It was really well written, too. The problem is that became the trope for Star Trek.
I don't
Particularly the
disagree.
movies. Particularly in the movies. That became the trope. Um,
You know, we're we're,
Sick of
we're
it.
talking about, stealing ideas. I took a couple mental notes too about stealing ideas from Deep Space Nine, and I am not happy about that. A, we had that changeling. I said I like the changeling. I have no problem with the changeling as a character. They stole the changeling from DS9, and the very first thing that peeved me off beyond belief, what is the changeling homeworld? It's a pool because they're liquid. When they're in their natural form, they're liquid. But when this changeling transforms, he looks like a pile of worms. That's not a changeling. Odo is such a great crafted character, and he you have such a developed and lore behind this race of people, and they have a complex history, and you're just going to throw a changeling in here and he looks like a pile of worms, and you're only going to give me one transformation in the whole movie, and it's a pile of worms, and he doesn't even change into an animal, he changes into a spider web. That was awful. Why would you do that to this potentially good character?
I found him to be unbelievably annoying. However,
But see, I think that's a good thing, and I will defend that because it needed to be different than Odo. Odo is proud. He is a prideful person, and he is just. This guy is willing to break the
mm,
rules, bend the rules. This guy doesn't have an ounce of confidence in him. He's always second guessing himself. But in the end, he is good enough to do the job. Again, I don't hate the character. I actually kind of like the character. And to see that confidence grow over a season or two would have been, or could have been, actually pretty good. I would have liked that.
yeah, well, you would have had more opportunity to make him an interesting character instead of an annoying one note
Yes, and
quippy
he
thing.
was very one note, but I could see, at just rewatching DS9, Odo in season one is one note. It is sad, but he is. He doesn't get his first like
You're
good
right.
solo episode until season two. This guy had to do it all in 90 minutes. And let's face it, only 10 or 15 were dedicated to him. I have a second point that I wanted to bring it back to DS9 and how they stole this. DS9 has a stable wormhole between the Alpha Quadrant and the Gamma Quadrant. What does this movie have? A stable ion storm between our universe and the mirror universe. Why? Why are we stealing this
I don't
idea?
think they stole it from Deep Space Nine. I'll be honest. I don't think they stole it from Deep Space Nine. I genuinely believe that the writers just didn't know what to do and just said, "Okay, screw it, wormhole. Oh, well, we can't do a wormhole because we always do wormholes. Make it an ion storm." I just think it was lazy writing. Not that they
I
stole it.
agree too. But with
Um,
DS9, it wasn't lazy writing.
no.
That gives you a reason to have a stable station to have unique stories. You still get, all these different species coming to the station, and I thought that was great.
Well, speaking
But the
of,
reason,
never
oh,
mind. No, go ahead.
the reason that I say that I think it does kind of take away from DS9, spoilers alert, at the end, the weapon goes off, which I hate, but it closes the link. In DS9, they
Well,
did that. They
that
set
link.
off the mines that destroyed the link. And I just couldn't help but notice, hey, Odo did that. It's the same thing in here. There's so many stories that we could tell with different races and species, and we take a lot of notes from DS9, and I think that's great. People like DS9. It's got like a cult following since it came out, but don't steal those ideas and kind of we're going to
Well,
steal the
again,
ideas, but we're not
I
going to put
don't.
any thought behind it.
I don't think they stole the ideas. I think they just didn't care. In fact, I don't think the writers watched any Star Trek at all. Um, I even though they all worked on Discovery, which that explains a lot. Um,
There's your
I
answer.
I just don't think they did. I don't even think they really know what Section 31 is. If you were going to tell me to stand there and be like, Adam, you absolutely 100% had to make a suicide. You have to make a Section 31 film, but it has to be kind of like Suicide Squad. I would have been there and would have been like, okay, I'm instead of it making it like Guardians of the Galaxy and all of them, I'm going to make it like The Dirty Dozen, which is a film from the '60s. It's a World War II film, um, starring Lee Marvin, and that's how I probably would have approached it. More military, more intrigue, a little more intrigue. Certainly would have made it a longer movie. This movie's only like an hour and a half, and there's
It's an hour and 34 minutes with credits.
with credits, and
It's short.
it doesn't slow down at all. Like it's
No.
just constant thing, and I can't. It's hard to keep track of. Um, not in terms of the story. It's hard to keep track of in terms of, oh, we're here now.
Yeah, no, if you mean in terms of them jumping between mirror universes in the past and the present, I 100%
No,
agree.
I mean like location to location. Which, by the way, what they do with the Terran, I can't stand so apparently in the Terran Empire, and this was immediately when I knew I was going to hate this film. According to this film, the Terran Empire chooses their empire by having a battle royale fight to the death.
Yeah, it made me think of like Hunger Games.
Yeah, battle royale. Sorry, that's battle royale is where the Hunger Games got its idea from. And what about the other emperor? Does the other emperor stay there until the other person matures? What's going on there? The thing that I'm
Well,
saying
I think
is
it's
that
implied that the other emperor died, and then they
it
hold it
doesn't
only
make a
after
lick of
they
sense.
die.
It doesn't make a lick of sense because I'm going to say this.
Why didn't they have
In
another tournament when
TOS,
Giorgio left?
yes. Well, in TOS, it is established because of the episode that introduces the mirror universe. It is established that Spock eventually took over the Terran Empire. And the Terran Empire was destroyed because of it at some point. And we see the ramifications of that in Deep Space Nine in the Mirror Universe episodes, which are always a lot of fun. So if this Battle Royale scenario is how they choose the Emperor, then Spock would not have been able to connive his way into becoming Emperor himself. So I don't understand why they have to, because they specifically choose children, it seems, to fight to the death, or teenagers to fight to the death.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably like 18. Like right out of high school, you're fighting to the death and you're proving your loyalty to the Empire.
To the Empire, yeah, the Terran
Which
Empire.
didn't I didn't know. I thought that, yeah, it just sounded like a battle royale. It sounded like Hunger
Uh,
Games. It sounded like Squid Game.
it
It's
did, yeah.
all of these things. There can only be one, but then of course you get
Well,
connections with people as you go throughout.
it supposedly ties into this whole theme of fate that Star Trek New Trek seems to be obsessed with. It's this theme of fate, and that it's all whimsical dialogue, and everybody talks like this for some reason. Mumblecore. And fuck off with the fate shit. Fuck off with the fate shit. I don't understand why suddenly Star Trek has gotten very spiritual over several big things. Because even in Deep Space Nine, which is by far the most spiritual show out of the OG shows, because of the whole prophets and everything like that with the Bajorans and everything like that, even those, they establish that that's only one tiny facet of the show, or this is just one facet of the show. There's multiple layers. I just don't understand this obsession with fate. And because the reason why I bring this up isn't just because of Section 31. This appears to be something that Discovery gets kind of obsessed with as well, and as well as some of the other Star Trek content. And I would even argue the 3 J.J. Abrams films has this in them, this idea of fate. Picard certainly does it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be like this? Why can't we just have a goddamn story that's happening, that's unfolding? Why does it suddenly have to do with...
Well,
Why does it have to do with
if I may,
a concept of religion or at all?
you you tend to dive into these a little bit more. So let me give my more surface level, but I think actually is very similar. The problem with New Trek, and and the only reason that I like Strange New Worlds is because this is one that does not really follow that rule. The problem with New Trek is it's about a character, not a ship and its
This is
crew.
true. This is very true. I didn't even think of
And
that. Thought
that's
that, Jim.
why it doesn't work. But then when you look at Strange New Worlds, it's the Enterprise crew.
Yep.
It's Pike and Spock and Uhura and I can't remember all of their names, but you can have episodes that focus on one character, but at the end of the day, it's the crew coming together and the ship is a character. Picard doesn't have a ship. Picard doesn't have a crew. Discovery is all about Michael Burnham and Captain Georgiou. It's not about their crews, and that's the problem.
I didn't even think about that. You're absolutely right, Jim. Well, I think that's modern.
That's
I
why
think
I don't like
that's.
it. But
I think
that's
that's.
going with it's this one person is the fate of the universe relies on this one person, and it's like no, that's not Star Trek. Star Trek is everyone coming together
Coming
to
together.
stop this
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. That's true. And granted, I think Section 31, the movie, kind of does that in a way. Because I do
It
like the
does.
idea of the two fights happening where they're trying to, you have the crew on the garbage ship, which was an interesting concept. Chucking
He
garbage
kept saying like
at
we don't have photon torpedoes, we got garbage.
we've got garbage.
That was funny.
That was funny. I will give it that. The other thing, well, actually, you know what? Kind of speaking of weapons, that wavelength thing that Giorgio uses.
I thought that was cool. Before you say
the entire time in my head, I'm like, no, it's a cool idea. It's a cool idea. It doesn't make sense, no, but
no,
it's a cool idea because if that really happened, suddenly she'd be falling through the floor and she'd be in space and she
I
would
was
die.
thinking the same thing too, because like they were going through the walls, but they didn't go through the floor.
Why can't you go through the floor? That's actually one of my problems because that superpower is something that the Flash has as well, and every time he does that, I go, why aren't you falling through the floor right now? But whatever.
But that's also established.
The thing that made me that I kept thinking in my head when I was seeing that was, man, this could have come in handy with the Borg.
Yeah. Getting through their shields. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they did toy with there are episodes where people are out of phase and they don't get into fights, but it's them trying to get back in phase with everyone. And so for them to say, hey, actually, here's this piece of technology that lets you go out of phase, but only to a specific phase, I didn't hate that. I really didn't.
Yeah,
I think
there's an episode of
there's
an episode of TOS that does that kind of. The
I know
Tholian
there's
web
at least one
kind of goes
or
into
two
that.
in TNG.
In TNG, it's there's two. There's one where it's like time freezes, so they're not really phasing into another world, and Picard starts going crazy. But it's my favorite Ensign Rowe episode, where her and Geordi
are out of phase.
Are out of phase, and I genuinely love that episode. It's one of my favorites. Yeah. So,
and they brought Rowe back for one episode of Picard to kill her. Awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
I have one more. I don't know how much time we have left, but I have one more good thing that I want to talk about and see your reaction.
Okay.
The little microbe in the Vulcan.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think if he was not a bad guy, he was actually a good guy. Very similar to Yaphet, going into mechanical things and being able to control them temporarily. But in doing so, when he leaves his body, it's on autopilot and it can only do minute tasks. That is a cool concept. And I think that's fairly original.
Well,
at least for Star Trek.
It is for Star Trek. Can you confirm with me for something?
That did that.
Can you confirm something for me with this? Because I cannot remember for the life of me. Was that Vulcan an actual Vulcan, or was he a robot?
He's an android.
He is an android. Okay, thank God.
Yeah.
Because that whole concept disturbs me like there's no tomorrow. If that was just some random Vulcan.
And that's why I say I don't necessarily hate it, because
it's
Jen said the same thing.
Idea.
She was like, "That's not a Vulcan. This is an insult to Vulcans." But then you realize this guy's not a good guy. He likes getting on people's nerves. He's doing this intentionally. He picked a Vulcan as a body to just annoy people.
So did his wife,
That I don't
apparently.
hate. That I hate.
Yeah, I didn't like
Because
that.
it's the same body. It's the same body,
Yeah.
just controlled by a new microbe. Why wouldn't she just go get her own body?
Yeah, why did she pick a male and have the same body?
I thought that was stupid.
Yeah, I didn't.
But I didn't hate the idea of, hey, there's a little microbe and he can't communicate with us unless he's in a bigger thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I like that. That was
I
cool.
like, again, this is another thing where it's like I love the concept.
Yes, the concept.
Why did you have to do this in a Suicide Squad style
Awful.
nonsense film? That there's so many. Yeah, that's actually my problem, because if you look at a lot of the individual elements of this, I go, you can do something with this. You can really do
Exactly.
something with this. Like the concept of that sort of of Giorgio and the other Asian dude kind of loving each other, I think is actually a very fascinating idea to have an overarching villain. I would not have done the revenge plot, but I certainly would have had, oh, they were long lost lovers and now they are on opposite sides of a great conflict. Or
Kind of like a Romeo
coming.
and Juliet. But yeah.
Yeah, a more disturbing kind of version of that.
But
And,
like that thing. And
well, that and
I
that
don't think it
stems
would be a
from
romantic love either. I think it's literally just a connection.
I think it's heavily implied that they were an item, I believe, in the.
Well, then that makes the ending even worse.
I think it is established that they were a romantic, because they definitely say "I love you" at one point in one of the flashbacks, and they definitely.
They say it a lot, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But
So
I'm like,
why?
that could have been. That's actually something that Star Trek has not done. They have so many opportunities to do something like this, but they always kind of shy away from it. The one time they didn't really shy away from it was actually in Deep Space Nine, when that lieutenant ends up becoming a part of the, what are they called? They are the humans that are on these planets that are now going to be turned over to Cardassia, and they refuse to leave.
Maquis.
The Maquis. What was his name? I forgot his name.
Eddington.
Eddington. And I was like, because it's kind of established that Cisco really likes him and like respects him, and then all of a sudden he gets
security.
Yeah, and then he gets stabbed in the back by him, or he feels he's been stabbed in the back, and that's actually one of my favorite arcs of Deep Space Nine.
To my
Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean.
The Javert to Jean Valjean.
Yeah, and I love that. That's, again, one of my favorite arcs of Deep Space Nine. And yet, that's really the only time I feel Star Trek has really had the balls to do that, because like that was actually going to be one of the original concepts of Star Trek Insurrection, was that it was going to be Picard organizing this insurrection because he wants to defend these people down on this planet, and it was going to be Riker saying, "No, we need this. The Federation says that this is what it's going to be. By God, I'm going to stand with the Federation, even though I'll hate fighting you. I will hate every moment of it. I'm going to." And to me, that fits perfectly with Riker, because you have episodes like Measure of a Man, for example, where Riker absolutely hates the fact that he now has to, testify and go against Data, who he considers his friend, but that's what protocol is telling him to do. And it's a freaking great episode because of that. And I would love to see more of that in Trek. I really would. I also just think that is rife for good character stuff, is when you have friends who end up being on opposite sides and having to fight each other.
I think you bring up a good point. It's hard to do that. It's easy to not do that. It's hard to do it and do it right.
Or it's easy to write that kind of conflict and say it's all about revenge. One wronged the other. And I'm like, no,
it needs to be also later on in the series too. Like once, you have your captain and your first officer,
Yeah.
that are well established. They can have their quarrels throughout, but then yeah, at the end,
Uh-huh.
say in season 5 of 7,
Hmm.
all right, now we're gonna have 6 episodes, kind of like what DS9 does a
What
lot
Deep
and
Space Nine does? Yeah.
Enterprise does a lot. It's an overarching thing where there's a tension between these two characters. What's gonna happen? I don't think. I mean, it can be done in one episode, but I'd love to see something like that fleshed out more. I agree, and not have all of the crew just immediately jump on board to say,
Yeah.
no, you're committing an act of treason. I'm
Yeah.
not jumping on board. In fact, I'm going to do everything I can to stop you.
Hmm.
And then at the end of it, do they respect each other still?
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. That's all pretty good. I only have a couple of other notes that I haven't checked off here for Section 31.
I only have one more.
I will say this: I was happy to see another Delton.
Milton? What's
Delton, yeah, that was the bald chick with the. Which this goes into my next My next note. Really, Giorgio, you have to say "sexy time." She keeps saying that there is a race of alien that is they are the only ones immune to sexy time with the Deltans charm, because one of the things with the Deltans is that they're an unbelievably sexually enticing race.
I guess I
Which
didn't
is
even pick up on
which
that.
is which is
Oops.
why in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Ilea is a Deltan.
Mhm.
And that is why there is specifically a little scene and a line when Kirk finds out, oh, there's going to be a Deltan on board. She says, and I quote, "My oath of celibacy is on record, Captain." So I was actually happy to see that there was another Deltan, even though they do nothing with her and kill her in a matter of 5 minutes.
That's probably why I didn't even remember her, because she was there and gone.
Yes. Yeah. Um, The other note that I have is it has to do with the constant chatter, and there's one scene in particular where it really drove me up the wall, and it was after the interrogation scene, where they've got that guy with all the cybernetics all over his head and everything like that, and then the ship blows up, right?
It
It
blew up for
was
like 10 minutes.
after
Anyway,
it crashes and we have all of our characters down on the planet, they would not shut up.
yeah. And the
And
camera was
yeah,
always
constantly
moving.
moving
Like,
all
what
over
are
the
we
place.
doing?
Yeah, and I'm just like, no, 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 no. Just it made me really want to go because I could understand what they're going for. They're going for like a noir. They wanted a noir style film, and I'm like, all I could do was think of was like the Sherlock Holmes episodes of TNG, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh god, you know how much better those were handled.
Which brings up another thing that I don't necessarily know if it's a good thing or it just got me.
Mm.
When they did the who done it and it's like, oh, who's the betrayer? I knew as soon as Zeph was gone, I knew it wasn't Zeph.
Oh
But
yeah.
then I did think it was Starfleet Girl. I did.
Oh, I
I was
didn't.
like, oh, nobody's gonna think that it's Starfleet Girl because she's Starfleet and you can trust Starfleet. So like I actually fell for that. And then that's why I like the Vulcan microbe thing
Mm-hmm.
more, because he just took over Zeph's, which, oh my God, gruesome when he took over his suit again and they're on those carts and that's a dead body.
Yeah.
And it's just a fucking robot around a dead body
Well,
moving it. That's kind of gruesome.
I knew it was going to be him. I knew it was going to be him,
I
and
didn't.
I'll
I
tell
should have
you
picked up on it.
I'll tell you why I knew it was going to be him. Because if it was the Federation girl, that would have been too smart.
See, I thought that's why I thought it was the Federation girl. I was like, oh yeah, they're not going to do that. Oh, they are going to do that.
Yeah,
But then they
it
didn't
would have
do that.
been too smart. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, that would have been interesting. This is a film made for the lowest possible common denominator, who thinks we don't have a brain, therefore the movie doesn't have a brain, therefore they're not going to do that. I would have appreciated it if
I
they tried to
I
do something like that.
I do too. But
Um,
I still don't hate the microbe.
no, I don't hate the concept of the microbe. I just hate how they
I hate the story.
Yes. Yeah.
The other thing that I really hated at the end, and we're talking about, okay, we do have this emotional connection between Giorgio and San, and
Yes.
I felt for them. And she had to, I didn't really feel for them, but like, you're supposed to feel for them. And she kills them at the end. And what does she immediately do? She grabs the Section 31's hand and they stare out the window. What
Yeah, I
a
didn't get that.
freaking insult. What, how do you love him all of a sudden? How are you getting over, you're supposedly your lover of the past 30 years, even though you treated him like a slave,
Didn't she
and
think she was
now
didn't
you're
she
with
think he
this
was dead?
he did. She did, yeah.
She did. Yeah. Okay.
But
Yeah.
like that's only fairly recently. Like she was
Yeah.
over in the mirror universe treating him like a slave for 20 or 30 years, and then
Yes.
she thought she was
Yes.
dead. He
Yes.
was dead.
Yeah.
And now he's alive and I love him and I want to save him and he's great. I can pull him back. Which, by the way, why is she all of a sudden good? What because
Well,
of him?
that's a big thing that Red Letter Media got into that I actually
I didn't
completely
get
agree
that.
with. She is Space Hitler. I don't understand why we're supposed to like Space Hitler. We really should not like Space Hitler. Stop trying to make us like Space Hitler. We want a villain that we hate. And
That's
that's
why
what they
Sloane
wanted to do with
works.
Giorgio. And that is exactly why Sloane works.
I don't
Um,
like Sloane,
he's
but I like
great.
Section 31 because he
Yeah.
does what needs to be done. I don't
And
want to like Giorgio, and
yeah.
I don't like her. I don't
Yeah.
want to have sympathy for her.
It takes a lot from a character and from a writing standard to make a villain that we hate for all the right reasons. Like the good acting, good character development, mystery and stuff like that. And the best example is probably Joffrey from the Game of Thrones series, or Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. We love hating them because they're so crazy. Um, but yeah, I have nothing else to really say other than that I highly recommend you guys watch Star Trek Renegades, which is a Tim Russ fan film that came out back in 2014 or 2015. And it is way better than this film, and it has a very similar concept to this film, and actually has Star Trek alumni in it, such as Walter Koenig and, before she died, Nichelle Nichols are in
Oh
it,
wow.
and have prominent roles in it. And again, Tim Russ directed it. He wanted it to kind of be a show in of itself, but CBS really shot that down, which is why I find it kind of ironic they're doing what they're doing now. But yeah, I highly recommend that. Star Trek Renegades. It's still a little not quite my style in terms of what Star Trek is, but it certainly feels a lot more like Star Trek than this.
I have one last note to say,
Mm.
and this actually is a good thing. We don't like this because we like old Star Trek. And it's not to say that these movies are good. They're not. I've had both Rob and my niece say, if this is bad Star Trek, I want to see good Star Trek. My niece
Uh-huh.
texted me out of the blue. I haven't talked to her in months. And she says, I watched Section 31. I know you don't like it. What's a good Star Trek to watch? Because if this is the bad, the good is really good. So they see those nuggets that we saw, and it's overall not good, but they see those nuggets and say, that's cool. I want more of that. And I think at the end of the day, if it is getting more people into the fan base, you decide, is it worth putting it
Yeah,
out or not?
that is true, and I am very happy to see how relevant, at least in terms of pop culture, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Voyager, those three shows in particular, have been because of New Trek. What New Trek is doing, it's getting new people, younger people, to go back and watch those. That's one reason why I love the MonsterVerse so much, is because they're getting so many new fans of Godzilla to go back and watch the older films from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then the 90s. And I'm very appreciative of that, and I'm also very appreciative that, especially out of all the shows that like have been in pop culture talk, it makes me very happy how well Deep Space Nine is doing now. that after all of these years, Deep Space Nine finally has found a true audience, because it is truly my favorite. And, it fits best. Serialization, it makes it work. I am happy for that. So, yeah, I'll give you that, Jim. I'll definitely give you that. Would I still recommend this movie? No.
No. I give him that last nugget. See, I knew you were going to point out a lot of negatives, and I knew I had a lot too, but I wanted to pull out those nuggets.
I did. I believe I messaged you when I was watching this, Jim. Like, I fell asleep 3 times watching this, so I constantly had to like rewind it and like go
Jack
back.
Fell asleep too.
And I was going crazy. But I remember, I think one of my messages to you was, "What the fuck, did we make this?"
Yes.
Like,
I don't want to know what the budget of this movie was. I don't.
Terrible looking movie, but
all
Jim,
of the shaky cam and the fake blur and all that. Oh.
Yeah, we've been talking about this movie enough. I think it's time we move on. All right, Jim. So this was your episode. Go ahead and close it. Remember, we have to kind of reintroduce ourselves and then pimp out our stuff, and then we'll say goodbye, see you in the next episode, and then take care, and then we'll go from there. So, Jim, once again, whenever you're ready, my friend.
All right, thanks for watching that episode. I told you it was going to be interesting. We talked about the pros and the cons of both Section 31 and just Star Trek in general, but I think that you can see that there is nuggets. There is hope for Star Trek in the future. I think if we condense it, really focus on those nuggets, there's a good chance that Star Trek can continue to thrive. Anyway, my name is James, and this has been 10 Forward. I don't really have a YouTube or anything, but I hope that I'll be on some more shows with Adam in the future. And so, Adam, why don't you pimp yourself out? It's your channel.
Well, yeah, I don't really need to pimp myself out because it's my channel. But yeah, this is where we will be having Welcome to 10 Forward going forward. Yeah, and once again, Jim, I think this is a crazy way to start the show, start this new season. So I'm looking forward to more episodes with you, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
There's the first episode. Next episode. What is the next episode?
TNG, I think.
The TNG, yeah, season 3. Okay, that's one I'll host.
Yeah, and then mine is DS9. Recurring characters.
Okay. And again, each one is that one went on for about 40 minutes, but I knew it was probably going to go a little longer because it's
the next ones can be shorter.
Yeah, it can definitely be shorter. And I definitely have kind of a structure for this next one that I kind of want to stick to. So because we are live, I'm actually going to say I'm going to want to throw up the be right back screen. I want to run to the restroom. I want to coat my throat with some liquids other than some caffeinated drinks. I want some water in me. And we'll take a small break, and then when we're back, we'll do the next episode. Alrighty, so, gentlemen, we will be right back. Well, all right, we are back. So we're going to do the next episode of Welcome to 10 Forward, which is one that I chose, one that I will host. So let me get the timer started, and I will kick it off. Well, hello there, folks. I am Adam Noyce. I'm one of the hosts of our show, Welcome to 10 Forward. Joining me, per usual, is my co-host, Jim Frasca. And today we are talking about Star Trek TNG Season 3. Today we're talking about Star Trek TNG Season 3. Is it the best season of all of Star Trek? Well, stick around. Let's find out. Well, there we go. We got a little intro there, and it will come the little... animation video that I did. Thanks, Steve. Steve did the music for it. Since I'm definitely going to keep that. All right, let's kick this off. So, do you like to have Star Trek on? I think you do, Jim, and I think you turned me on to this just to. Do you like to have Star Trek on in the background a lot?
Particularly when, I have to emphasize, I do not watch while I drive, but I particularly like to listen to specifically TNG when I drive because it is a very much dialogue and politic heavy show, and you can listen to the show and not miss much.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've seen the show enough times that I know what's going on the screen, and I do just sometimes, yeah. When I'm driving, instead of listening to music or a podcast, I'll listen to Star Trek. Absolutely.
Well, I think TNG is a good show for that kind of watching because it's so episodic that you don't really need to necessarily constantly put as much effort into paying attention to what's going on because every episode is its own standalone story. That's one of the benefits of it. But that kind of style made me kind of turn back to TNG. Because I needed, some stuff on in the background while I was working on other things. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to put on Star Trek Season 3. I don't want to deal with Seasons 1 and 2. I'm just going to go straight to Season 3. And after going through Season 3 again, and I looked through everything and how many episodes are there throughout all 26 episodes that we see within Season 3. And the more I realized, this is the definitive Star Trek season, and there's only one episode I don't like out of 26.
I need to know which one is that.
Menage a Troy. That's the one where Troy's mother.
Yes, and
Troy's mother gets kidnapped.
They pretend to love the Ferengi.
Yes, I don't really like that episode.
Is that Summer's Day?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, not a great episode.
Not a very great episode. Also, by far the least reviewed one, or has the worst reviews out of all of them. But I'm looking at all these episodes, and not just are they good episodes, they're phenomenal episodes. From pretty much beginning to end. And I argue that Season 3 is not just where TNG finally found its footing, it's where Star Trek going forward found its footing. It's that important. I don't know what your thoughts are, Jim.
I don't think that I could think of a better, like you said, single season. DS9 will always be my favorite, and there are episodes that are great in Voyager and Enterprise and all of the Star Trek shows, but I think that is a fair statement. Looking at every episode, and you give me a one-line, overview of what the episode is, and I know exactly what you're talking about because it's a memorable episode.
Yeah, that's just it. It's like it's a memorable episode. And It is kind of interesting because seasons 1 and 2 of Star Trek are kind of like with this reviewer that I was watching called them anomalies because they feel so different from season 3 forward of TNG, and I completely agree with that assessment. It feels like it's a completely different show. And a lot of that comes down to the behind-the-scenes stories that were going on, because this season is when Gene Roddenberry was finally promoted so much he was essentially kicked upstairs. So he had very little control over the show itself from this point forward. Immediately, new uniforms, which was the first aesthetic thing to happen with Season 3. I remember when I was first watching it through where I go, oh my God, thank you. No longer are they made out of tight, ridiculously tight, impractical spandex, but they're actually made out of wool now. So they actually look
kind of like this.
Yeah, they look like you, Jim. Yeah, Jim, show that off. Jeez, woof.
I mean,
yeah, right. The Riker maneuver.
The Riker.
Which I found out, by the way, that the and I didn't know this, but it totally explains a lot now that I've learned about this. But the costume designer for the first 2 seasons of Star Trek TNG was also the main costume designer for Star Trek TOS, which explains a lot why they made the certain decisions that they made within the first 2 seasons of the show. Also, the first 2 seasons of Star Trek TNG used a lot of unused episodes written for TOS, which is why they feel so dated and kind of jarring because, it might have worked with the TOS crew. It might have worked with that era of Star Trek, but by the late 80s, not so much. But not just that. It's even the look of the show changed because they apparently, the original cinematographer, his name was Edward R. Brown. And if you look at Star Trek seasons 1 and 2, the way how he lit everything, the way how the show was shot, it was a little bit darker. Everything was a little more flat and a lot more beiges. And then he got replaced by a guy named Marvin Rush, who would work on Star Trek from season 3 for the next... He started with season 3 of TNG, and he would work on this show for another 16 years. He is the man that made Star Trek look the way it did. That made this era.
That put him all the way through Voyager.
Yes.
Or almost through Voyager.
Yeah. Yep. He was the main cinematographer, dude. And his cinematography is a lot more contrast. It's a lot brighter. There's a lot more contrast. There's a lot more colors. The walls aren't as brown. They're a little bit lighter in color. Stuff that I just find fascinating. And a lot of that, this looks like Star Trek to me. When you think of how Star Trek looks, it's this. It is this season that really establishes that. And yeah, it's just really fascinating. It just how much, like, if you like, let's look at the episode list here. We have Evolution, Ensigns of Command, The Survivors, Who Watches the Watchers, which is a fantastic episode, The Bonding, Booby Trap, which is a really good one. I think that's a highly underrated episode. The Enemy, The Price, The Vengeance Factor, The Defector, which is my second favorite Romulan episode anything. The Hunted, which is an interesting episode. The High Ground, Deja Q.
Deja Q is great.
Deja Q is great. A Matter of Perspective is an interesting episode. Yesterday's Enterprise is one of the best Star Trek anything. That's the one. Yeah, that's the one where the Enterprise C gets caught into a vortex, and suddenly we're at war with the Klingons, and it's bad. And Tasha Yar is back. The Offspring, which one is The Offspring? Because I get that one confused with the other one. Oh, that's the one where Data makes a daughter. The Offspring.
Val Vor?
Lol. Lal. Sins of the Father, which is the whole Klingon Civil War. And we get a really good look at Worf as a character, finally. Allegiance, I should say. Singular. Captain's Holiday, which introduces us to Picard's overarching love interest.
Vash.
Let's see. Tin Man, which I like that episode.
I think Tin Man is a good episode, but I think it is one of the weaker ones going through this list so far. I think
yes.
It's a little bit weaker, but it's still not a bad episode.
No, it's not a bad episode at all. That's followed by Hollow Pursuits. I don't really remember that one per se.
Oh, that's the first one that introduces Barclay.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, introduces him.
Oh, that's a good one.
The Most Toys, Sarek, which is one of my favorite episodes of.
Sarek's great, yeah.
That is a great episode. Menage a Troy, Transfigurations, and probably the best known out of all of these episodes, Best of Both Worlds Part 1, which still has probably the greatest cliffhanger of all time. Of all time. Every other cliffhanger I can think of for a season or for a show or an episode in general pale in comparison. It aspires to reach this level. Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's a good way to put it, Jim. But you look at that, it's like, Jesus, how many characters does that introduce? And like, I just sort of like went off the top of my head, and I'm like, holy crap! We already mentioned one. It introduces Vosh, which I've always found fascinating as a concept, that Picard would be so attracted to her.
Well, because
And
she's the bad guy, his evil side, or not
yeah,
his bad boy side. That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
Bad
and
boy.
it totally works. You don't think it would work, but it
But it
does.
does.
They have wicked good chemistry with each other in every episode that they appear in with each other, and I like how they even play that. What's the episode? I think it's later on. I want to make sure. Yes, because Deja
I
Q is
know
not that
she's in
episode.
that one.
There's an episode of TNG where Picard dies. His artificial heart implodes or something like that, and so Q takes him back in time to kind of change things in the past, and things just don't work out very well for Picard because of things
Yeah, he
that he
ends up
changed.
becoming like a science officer,
Right,
if I
right.
remember correctly,
Picard looks weird in
because
a
he
blue
never got in the
uniform.
fight with
The
uh,
Nausicaan.
the Nausicaan, yeah, and
Yeah,
he never got stabbed
yeah.
in the heart.
And when that episode came out, suddenly I was like, no, it makes total sense why he's attracted to Vosh. Because we see this other side, this reckless side of Picard, and I'm like, okay. And as he's gotten older, he's refined it, and I really like that. Plus, it is kind of funny to see Picard out of his element on Ryza and everything like
It's
that.
almost like, he's such a stickler throughout all of the show, and then Vosh pulls that child curiosity out of him.
Yeah, which
And
again
yeah,
is
I like
stuff
it.
that we saw in season 1 and 2. In season 1 and 2, he's almost as two-dimensional as you can get.
Yeah.
A typical captain, stoic captain. And I like that. I like that little sprinkling of that, which kind of goes into some of the things too. Now that Gene Roddenberry was upstairs, are you aware of what's called the Roddenberry box?
Is that where you can't have the story from one episode go carry into another, and he wouldn't do anything more than a two-parter?
Well, that was part of it. That was one of it. It was a set of rules that apparently Roddenberry set for the writers to follow. That was one of them. But the biggest one that drove everybody nuts, and Ira Stephen Bear was the first to really run with this, because he would leave TNG after this season and go start working on Deep Space Nine, developing Deep Space Nine. No interpersonal conflict with the crew.
You have to have interpersonal conflict.
Yeah, I'm like, how do we have a show without that? And the thing that always, and that was a big problem with seasons 1 and 2 in particular, was the lack of interpersonal conflict between members of the crew in particular, because you can't have character without that, or character growth because of that, which always fascinated me, because I'm a big fan of TOS and the TOS movies, right? Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are nothing but interpersonal conflicts with each other.
Especially in the movies, yeah.
And, well, the movies are a bit different. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. Are a little bit different because Roddenberry, after the first one, after the motion picture got promoted so much, actually, he kind of was able to step away from the movies, because after the motion picture, he started really kind of developing TNG, which allowed other people to come in and work on the movies. And so I don't understand why. To him, it was like we've evolved past that. Because like I remember in there's a story about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where there's a sign at the beginning of the film that blatantly says no smoking on it, and Gene Roddenberry threw a fit over that, because he said we as humans would have evolved past the need for that vices by this point in the future. And I'm like, who cares? Like, come on. In fact, I would think that the yearning for vices like that would only increase in a post-scarcity society. Because suddenly we're not paying for it anymore. Suddenly it's all there willy-nilly. Now you can indulge, but...
And we have the technology to, you're no
Yeah.
longer going to get sick from this, so it's a
Yeah.
personal choice.
Yeah, exactly. But because he got kicked upstairs, essentially, this really introduced a lot of interpersonal stuff and a lot of character stuff, particularly with Worf and Riker. Those were the two in season 3 that I can recall that really had somewhat of the most character development out of all of them. With Worf, we have Sins of the Father, which is when it introduces not only Kern, but it also introduces the Duras family, who were the arch nemesis of the Moog family. Yeah, and I know I think you like the Klingon stuff, right?
I do. I
Yeah,
do very much.
yeah.
I think it also helped Michael Dorn, and we were talking about this the other day, because I had wanted to watch a couple episodes to get back into the TNG, and I was rewatching The Survivors, and I jokingly said, "Oh yeah, of course season 3 is the best because it has that line that Worf says in the house, good tea,
Oh, good
nice
tea, nice
house."
house. Yes, yes.
And the reason that I think that that moment was a changing point for Worf and Michael Dorn is, again, just like Picard, Worf had always been stern. He's
Mm-hmm.
stubborn, he's glory, and he's saying that to be nice, but he has to say it, all stoic like and tough guy like, but it comes across as funny.
It
And
does.
that
Yeah.
is a huge key and turning point for Michael Dorn and Worf that stayed with Worf
Mm-hmm.
throughout the entire TNG and DS9.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
in Picard, spoiler alert.
Yeah. But also, it's also, and this is one of the things that I love about Worf so much that doesn't really get explored until um Sins of the Father. It is him coming to terms with the fact that he isn't a traditional Klingon, but because of that, in many ways, he is the epitome of what Klingons should be. Because he
Yeah.
doesn't go into he hasn't been infected by all the politicking that's been going on Kronos and everything like that, and it's very obvious about that within this episode. And it establishes it transforms the Klingons really from being these sort of two-dimensional villains that even the TOS movies do, to being really a nuanced species. And I would argue, because this came out, let's see, this came out in 90. When did The Undiscovered Country
I don't know.
Star Trek come out? Because that came out in 91, so they were in production at around the same time. And something that I loved about The Undiscovered Country is it really brought in a lot of nuance with the Klingons. Like, one of my favorite decisions ever, and I wish the Klingons were depicted like this more, is that Nicholas Meyer approached the Klingons not so much as the warrior race and the honor and stuff like that, like the whole trope about that, but he treated them like samurai instead of making them like
I
the
can see that,
Mongols.
yeah.
And they kind of do that here as well. So they were kind of going on at roughly the same time. I'm like, God, we really got the Klingons in this era. The Klingons that we love. We wouldn't have my favorite Klingon of all time if it wasn't for this, and that's Martok from Deep Space Nine.
I was going to say Martok is my favorite Klingon.
Yeah, we get Gowron. Gowron becomes a big
Do
deal
the eyes.
because of this.
Go ahead.
There's another episode too that nobody talks about, but I'm like, this is a phenomenal episode. It's called The High Ground, and this had to do with terrorism. Crusher gets abducted, which, by the way, Crusher comes back. She replaces Polanski in this. She's back. Welcome, and she gets captured by these terrorists, and it really goes into a lot of the discussions of, like, what is a terrorist? Define what a terrorist is. And it's such a wonderfully nuanced episode that we didn't have before in TNG or even TOS, I'd argue. And what I mean by that is, despite the fact that we really sympathize with what the terrorists are doing, we understand what they're doing, we even like these characters that Crusher is talking with, they're still killing a lot of people, a lot of innocent people. They are still terrorists. And again, this being before 9/11, it's a very interesting and unique take that I don't think we'd see today in a lot of our stuff, because this was commenting on real life events. It was commenting on about the Irish Republican Army, and there's stuff going on with Britain and the reunification of Ireland, and everything was happening at around this time of this episode, and it was commenting on that.
That's why I like Star Trek, though. It's all political commentary
I
or
love
social
political commentary. Yeah.
Yeah. I may
Yeah.
not get the exact reference it's going to, but I can think of, oh yeah, what was going on in the 90s? And then you watch some of these episodes and it's like, wow, yeah, I can't imagine what it would be like then. I wish New Trek was doing that. Like, yeah, sure, there's some political commentary, but it's all, and I don't want to say woke, but it's too much in your face. It needs to be a little bit more subtle like that. I think that's a
Right.
good episode of, like, it's not in your face, but it's saying like, yeah, hey, there's some stuff going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and it even has stuff with Riker, and there's this girl that Riker teams up with on that, and she is representing the government side of things, fighting these terrorists, and she does some horrible things too, you know. And I really like that, and it's very interesting. I couldn't help but wonder though, because to me, even though Crusher is the one that gets, abducted in that episode, to me, I was like, this would have been a much better episode if that was Tasha Yar.
Well, Tasha was raised by. No, she was like a freedom fighter.
Kind of.
Like,
she was on this planet where she was sold into slavery, and she kind of got out of that, which is why she was now with the Federation, and everything like that. And I'm like, this would have been a perfect episode for Tasha Yar.
Because she would be a little bit more of a sympathizer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the dialogue would have been very interesting, because in many ways, and I think this is probably where her character would have gone had she stayed, she is almost as pure Federation as you can get, because she's seen the other end of it. She genuinely believes in everything the Federation kind of stands for. She would have been good for Section 31, probably. She's an ideologue, or I think she would have become a bit of an ideologue for what the Federation is, because she's been at that low. And they kind of hint at that. There's one episode of in season 2, I believe, where she's only in season 1. There's one episode where they're talking about drugs, and it's not a great episode, but it's an interesting episode where there are these two races that they think there's a virus that's killing them, but really it's just because they're going through withdrawals from this drug that this other alien species has been selling them. And Tasha has to explain to Wesley, it's total PSA and not handled very well, but Tasha explains like, hey, this is what people do. When things are dark all the time and bad and everything like that, people do turn to drugs as a way of escaping. And I love how she's the one to explain it, because she would know more than anybody else probably, really on the Enterprise, what's happening there. And I appreciated that. And I think they would have gone further with that if she had stayed. But that was my only. I really wish she was there, other than in yesterday's Enterprise, which is a fantastic episode. And I wanted to mention, like that episode, The High Ground, because not many people talk about that episode. People remember yesterday's Enterprise, Deja Q, Sins of the Father, Best of Both Worlds, certainly, but not The Offspring. I'm surprised The Offspring isn't talked about more. You love Data.
I do love Data. For those that may or may not know, I base my outfit off of Data, Lieutenant Commander, and the yellow uniform. I do like Data, and that's a sad episode. Like, he wants to be able to procreate like any other sentient being. And it's kind of ripped away from him. So it's sad. And he never really tries again.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find interesting, is he never tries again. It is.
the best I can't remember the exact quote, but the best thing that Data ever once said was like when one episode where Geordi almost dies, and it's later on in the show, and Data does everything that he can to protect Geordi, and Geordi at the end goes, Data, it's almost like you love me, like you care for me. And Data goes, that's impossible, Geordi. I can't feel love, I can't feel care, but I can get used to you. Data is such a complex character because that's his way as an android of saying, I want to have that, reliability, that consistency of you in my life. But he doesn't, it's not love, but it's love to Data. And that episode is that again. It's why does he want to procreate? Oh, just because that's what sentient beings do. Does he actually care about her? No, but yeah, he does
Well, that
in
kind of
his own
reminds
way.
me. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of there's an episode where Data kind of has somebody tries to mimic him. A little child tries to mimic him because like he lost his family and everything
Oh,
like that. And again, that was a little
that's
bit
in this,
later.
isn't it?
No, because this season has what's called the bonding, and that was when Worf was leading kind of an away team, and
Yes,
the
yeah.
kid
I get
loses his
those two
entire
mixed up.
family. Yeah, the kid
Yeah.
loses his family because of it, and this is just something. This is the limitation of TV back then, but I would have loved this more than what they ended up doing with Alexander. Worf decides to essentially adopt this kid and bring him into the House of Moog as sort of repentance for this, and they both kind of go through the tragedy of loss together in different ways. Because again, this kid lost his family while Worf lost a subordinate, and they're still grieving. And again, we wouldn't have really had that, I don't think, in the previous seasons of TNG. And that kind of goes into the interpersonal conflicts that happen. Hell, in the first episode, Evolution, there's a great moment between Wesley and Crusher,
Yeah.
where Wesley's angry at her. It's like he's like get off my back. I've been doing stuff that no other kid my age would have been able to do.
He's
Get
been
off
doing
my
more than
back.
the actual
Yeah.
cadets are doing.
Yes, exactly. And he's justified in saying this. And then she's like, well, you're my son and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, and I love this. You weren't here for the last year. You have no right to tell me this. And I loved that. And I'm like, this is stuff that was missing in the first two seasons of TNG.
I was going to say, Wesley in general in this season
Mm-hmm.
is not, shut up, Wesley. He's a legit character that has his own flaws. And like you said, him relearning his mom throughout the whole episode, not just him being a cadet, unofficial cadet, but relearning who his mom is and having that work-life balance between she's technically my superior officer, but she's also my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I thought there was a lot of really good Wesley moments in this, whereas later on he kind of is just that, pretentious, snobby kid that is better than everyone else. But in this season, he's more relatable and a better
He's not as
character.
he's definitely not as annoying as he is in season 1 and 2, and a lot of that was just because of the writing. I feel really bad for Will Wheaton, the actor, because just how horrible the scripts were that they were handing him, specifically making him annoying and stuff like that. Despite the fact that Gene Roddenberry loved him. You also mentioned earlier, Jim, an episode that I didn't really want to talk about, but you brought it up, and it's a really good episode, The Survivors. The one
I think
Good
that's one of
Team
my
Nice House.
favorite
Holy
of
crap.
all Star Trek.
That is, again, it doesn't really expand on the lore of TNG or of Star Trek that much, but what an interesting concept of an episode, And some great performances, too. The guy that plays that alien.
You know what I was thinking to myself too?
What?
It's the 1990s. That dude is probably 70 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and he is in it, man. He
Oh, yeah.
accepts that he's an alien and in this. Just my grandpa doesn't understand how YouTube works, but this dude believes that he's an alien and all of this technology is real. I mad props. He's in one episode and he's got 15 minutes of dialogue.
Well, yeah. And well, I also like just the concept of him being an alien on an alien world. And him being, one of those big, this is probably something left over from TOS, because in TOS they do this a lot, where there's like the real omnipotent being that can control it. Kind of like Q. They kind of stuff like that. And he's that, and God, the performance. He gives a gut-wrenching performance. That one line he gives, when he finally explains what he did.
I killed the Vorhal or whatever.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, well, it's only natural that you kill the invasion. He's like, no, I killed them all.
All.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh.
That was very deep. And
very
the thing
good.
is, he feels remorse.
Mm-hmm.
And what is Picard gonna do? Can Picard even imagine actually punishing him?
How can you punish him?
How?
Yeah.
He just wiped out, I think he said 40 billion. If he wanted to, he could have made the Enterprise vanish. He could have made the Federation vanish. But he didn't, because he feels remorse for what he did.
Well, I think Picard obviously does not like this alien, because what he did is pure evil. That is pure evil, what that alien did. But also, how can you punish him? Because he's an omnipotent being, and I think what they decide is that your guilt will kill you.
Well, they said leave him alone.
Yeah.
He needs to be in solitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and also, again, if Picard did try to punish him, he could have just retaliated again.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, this is a phenomenal episode. Not an episode many people talk about in terms of season 3.
It's
like, we actually haven't talked about the two really big episodes of this season hardly at all in this episode, because we got to start wrapping it up here. We didn't talk about Yesterday's Enterprise or Best of Both Worlds hardly at all, and those are like the two big.
Because everyone talks about them, like
exactly.
You said, but
and I'm sitting
other
here,
episodes are great in this season.
And I'm sitting here, I'm like, that's just a random episode in this season, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That hardly anybody talks about. And like, look at the episode with Sarek. That has one of my favorite moments, because it really establishes just how much Sarek. And again, this is why Leonard Nimoy and Mark Leonard are the best Vulcans, in my humble opinion. I know you really like Tim Russ, and I like Tim Russ too, but to me, you can't top.
No. I would never say that he is better than Leonard Nimoy.
I didn't say better. I just know you put him on that list.
He's my favorite Vulcan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do respect Tim Russ, and I think Tim Russ is the only other person that truly understands what it is to be a Vulcan. I would agree with that. Emotions. Yeah. You suppress them.
Yes. Yeah. And because that's what Sarek does, and particularly that episode. He's got like their version of Alzheimer's, essentially, where it's like he starts losing that ability to control his emotions. Because a lot of people don't realize that Vulcans, despite them being the cold, more logical beings, are very highly emotional and highly volatile aliens. I mean, they almost destroyed. The reason why Vulcan is now basically a desert planet is because they had a nuclear war. They were about ready to annihilate each other. And that is what's fascinating about that, because Sarek has always had, established in TOS, a very rocky relationship with Spock that doesn't get mended until Star Trek 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even get mended in Star Trek 3. It's just the beginning of it being mended, because we also have a good scene. We have that wonderful scene in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, where Spock goes up to Sarek, and he just looks at Sarek in the eyes, and he says, "Tell Mother I feel fine." Because that was one of the themes of that film, was that Spock was asked, "How do you feel?" Because the computer knows he's part human. And he doesn't know how to answer that question. And by the end of Star Trek 4, Spock can say it, and he goes up to his father and says that. It's a beautiful moment. And in this episode of TNG, Sarek, you have that wonderful moment where Picard, takes on all those emotions because of that mind meld. And first off, a great performance by Picard as well, or by Patrick Stewart. But he says the line, and it makes me tear up. and he's talking about Spock, and he's angry, and he's crying, and he's sad. It's all these emotions wrapped up in one great performance. And he's talking about Spock, and he goes, "I wish I could show you how much I love you."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, it hits me
And,
right in the
there's
feels.
so much love that is talked about in that episode too, because if I remember correctly,
Mm-hmm.
Sarek's wife is in a lot of it too, and somebody asks her like, "How could you love somebody who's so emotionless?" And she says, "He loves me with all of his heart. He just shows me
Mm-hmm.
differently than you're used to."
Yeah.
And that again tying into the end of the episode when Sarek is dying and he does let all that emotion out, like Vulcans are deeper than we give them credit for.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and there's a lot of that. You can also go the opposite end of the spectrum too. This goes completely off topic, so I'm not even going to bring it up in this episode. But there's an episode in Enterprise where there's like these resistance fighters on Vulcan, and
Oh, the ones that are
Archer.
exploring their.
No. I know what you're talking about. It's not them.
Oh, okay.
Archer has to go and look for them because there was this assassination attempt on the Federation ambassador, or the Earth ambassador, I should say, on Vulcan. And the Vulcans pin it on the splinter group that is on Vulcan. And I believe, who's the main Vulcan on that show? What's her name?
T'Pol.
T'Pol. She's also in TOS. T'Pol. Um, her mother is in this organization or something like that. And I'm not sure if it was her mother. It was definitely a relative. And Archer's getting all these visions and stuff like that from this group. And to me, the Vulcans in that do not act like Vulcans. That's my big problem. The Vulcans, the Vulcan government is a villain in that episode, and they're too emotion. They've got too much emotion. They're angry. And I'm like, that
Yeah,
wouldn't
Enterprise didn't understand Vulcans very well.
very well. I think T'Pol is a huge misstep in general on that show.
I think her
The
like
actress is great.
commanding officer, I think
Yeah.
he understood Vulcans better, but even he got like very clearly emotional all the time.
Oh, I like him a lot. Actually, I think he's the
I
best
like him
Vulcan in
too,
the
but I
show.
don't.
Yeah.
There's some moments where it's like, yeah, no, you're letting your emotions out. But
A
the
little too
argument could
much.
also be
Yeah.
made that it's 200 years ago. Maybe the Vulcans didn't,
It's true.
have such control. So maybe we'll give them a pass.
It's true because, granted, I just bitched about them, right? But yet, Enterprise has a couple of my favorite Vulcan episodes. Period, and stuff like where T'Pol brings Trip home
Yeah.
to show his mother, and I'm like, that's a great episode. That's a great episode. Whatever. That's not TNG at all, but yeah, bringing it
I don't
back
wanna
on
get off
course,
topic.
so we can wrap this up. So we can wrap this episode up, man. I gotta say, I agree with the sort of general consensus that Star Trek TNG was when not just TNG got good, people started going, oh, what's going on with TNG, you know? And people started flocking
Yeah.
to it.
It's when Star Trek got good.
It's when, yes, Star Trek was like back. It's like, we're back, baby. This is why people like us. And
You gotta let
It's-
Riker grow his beard. But that happened.
exactly. Oh yeah, you're right. You're fucking right. I totally forgot all about that. It's like what was that saying? The saying is that Star Trek TNG doesn't get good until Riker grows the beard. Deep Space Nine doesn't get good until Cisco shaves his head.
Shaves his head and goes to the goatee. Yep.
It's something about the beards that ends up making
Something about halfway through season 2, beginning of season 3.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, you're totally right, because TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise, the first 2 seasons are very rocky. Very rocky.
Yeah.
Can't speak too much about Voyager, because, again, I haven't seen that in like 15 years, so I can't... Not overly
Voyager
familiar
doesn't
with it.
really have in my opinion, it doesn't have a whole season that's
Mhm.
good. But once they stop having the, I think it's the Kalon and
Oh,
the
the
Maquis
Kalon.
like
Yeah.
interlacing, once they get out of that, it does get better. Until you get to the Borg, and then the Borg ruin the show again. So that
Yeah.
season 3 and 4 is pretty good, and then
Yeah.
5 on, it's like you got good episodes.
So, Jim, I'm going to ask just so we can wrap this up. Do you agree with that assessment? Is Star Trek TNG season 3 like the best of Trek?
I definitely think I, I I would agree, and I didn't think about this until you said it. It's may not be the single best season of any show, but it's definitely the groundwork for what was to be the next 7 seasons of DS9 and 7 seasons of Voyager, plus the 5 remaining seasons of TNG. It laid really good groundwork for this is Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
So I will give it that 100%.
Well, I personally think it is the best season of anything Star Trek. If you want to look at a season on an individual level, where this is the only bit of Star Trek you'll ever watch or ever know about, this is it.
I think that's
because,
a fair
again,
assessment.
only one episode do I not really care for. And even that episode is at least fun. And that was
Come to
Menage a
think of it,
Troi.
it's probably one of the first episodes just in Star Trek that they have fun.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not
Luxana, is that her
as
name?
big of a
Yeah,
fan
Luxana.
of TOS personally, so I don't know if there are any like
There are Trouble with Tribbles.
There's some funny moments in the movies where it's character building, not lore building or world building, but character building.
Well, Star Trek 4.
Yeah. Thanks.
Star Trek 4 is basically a comedy. But
Are you nuking for nuclear
vessels. I still love my favorite. The line that I quote more than anything else in fucking Star Trek 4 is, "Admiral, they'd be whales here."
My dad used to always go like this. Hello, computer.
Oh, hello,
I had
computer.
no idea
yeah.
what he was talking about until we watched that movie. So I get it.
Yeah,
Hello,
it's
computer.
it's great. But yeah, freaking season 3 is where it's at, man. And it's hard pressing for me to say, oh, you want to watch TNG full through? A part of me wants to go give them like 5 or 6 episodes from season 1 and season 2 to watch, and just watch those episodes, and then go to season 3.
This is why when we started with watching Star Trek, we started with DS9 because it has a rocky first couple seasons, but I do agree. I think TNG's first 2 seasons are way more rocky, and it is a complete 180 when you get into season 3, like from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, Jim, we're gonna wrap this up. So, Jim, let me just cut to this, and we'll do that again. Well, Jim, it's time for us to end this. So, why don't you pimp yourself out, sir? Like a
I would say that I stream on YouTube, but I don't really anymore. But I am James. I am a Trekkie. I love coming on these shows. I love talking to Adam with Adam about Star Trek. So thanks for having me, Adam. I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Absolutely. I love talking about this. Thought this would be a kind of a fun, overarching episode where it's a little less focused and more of an overarching general thoughts of something, and I was not let down. But Jim, thank you very much for joining me. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the next episode of Welcome to 10 Forward. See you there. Alrighty. 2 episodes down.
Woo!
Cool. Yeah. Wow, this stream is doing so bad.
Oh no.
I think I've had at most 3 viewers. Now we're at none.
Oh no.
That's fine.
That's okay.
Alright, let me pull up. Alright, what's the next episode? The reoccurring characters of Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
Yes.
It looks like it is.
Yes.
Let's do that. Okay. This is your idea,
It is my idea.
so you can definitely introduce this. Um, yeah, let's do it. Let's fucking do this. Are you ready to go, or do you want to take a small break?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I think I'm good to go for this. I might have to call it a night after this, though.
Yeah, let's well we could I think section 31 went long, but I think
Went
it was
long.
good. I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then yeah, I was gonna say I probably want to call it at 11 too. So
Yeah.
um but I mean I have a lot to say with Deep Space Nine. It's gonna be off the cuff again, but I have a lot that I've been
Yeah,
thinking
and
about.
again, the episode we were going to do next is one that I think in hindsight, because of me looking at the Wikipedia page, I think would have been a mistake to do.
I agree. There, like you said, there is a lot that we can talk about. And if we want to do something like that, I think talking about just species that we would like to learn more about is the better topic
That
than
would
the
have been,
Breen.
yeah, that could have been a better
And I think we
episode.
can
Yeah,
do that the next time we do something like this.
yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to do it live. It was just my idea to do it for this month, anyways. Well, okay. So we'll do the same thing as before, Jim. You'll introduce this episode, and we'll go from there. All right, I'll let you know when to go. We shall start in 3, 2, 1. Begin, sir.
I'm sorry. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to 10 Forward, where two nerds talk about Star Trek. I mean, everybody's talking about Star Wars. Let's talk about Star Trek. Come on. Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about reoccurring characters in Star Trek, specifically in Deep Space Nine. There are a lot of individual characters that get a lot of love, and there are a lot of recurring characters besides the main cast, and even some that become main cast. So this is an episode that you don't want to miss. Again, my name is James, and this is Welcome to 10 Forward.
That was certainly an intro.
I don't know, man. Am I supposed
No,
to
it
introduce
worked. It
you?
worked.
I don't know.
No. You don't have to introduce me on the intros. The
It's
big
your
thing is
YouTube
just
channel, so
introducing the episode itself. This is the big thing. God, I love Deep Space Nine, Jim. Jim, I love Deep Space Nine so much.
I started with Deep Space Nine thanks to you.
I thought you started with TNG.
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
fell in love with Star Trek with Deep Space Nine.
I think that was what it was. I was like, wait until you get to Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And
Wait,
you're like,
wait
okay.
until you learn about Garrick.
Actually, you know what? Speaking of Garrick,
That's a perfect starting point.
that is a perfect starting point. I just finished reading actually his book, Andrew Roberts' book, who's the actor who played Garrick, called A Stitch in Time. And it was interesting. I'm not going to sit here and say it was really good, but it was certainly interesting.
I didn't know he wrote a book.
He did. It was very interesting. You would like it. I think you would like it a lot.
Is it based on Star Trek, or is it like just a book he wrote?
No. It's about Garrick. It's Garrick's story. It's his backstory.
Considering we never get that.
Yes. And
really?
Well, which is interesting because a part of me is like, oh, is he still telling the truth or is he lying?
Right.
But it's called A Stitch in Time because it's 3 distinct timelines. It is his past. It is him on Deep Space Nine just before he leaves with Major Kira to go help with the Cardassian resistance. And it's him after the war is over and him helping to rebuild Cardassia. And they all intertwine with each other. And it's interesting.
There was a book that Bashir borrowed from Garrick, and it was basically that's how they tell these stories. It's a life story, and it's just rinse and repeat every generation. I think it's called The Never-Ending Cycle or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. The Cardassians
But anyway,
are weird.
The main thing that I wanted to talk about with this is these characters that we know and love that just get so much attention. The first one that I wanted to really talk about was Jake, especially coming
Mm.
off of Wesley from TNG, and Wesley being the golden child. He does no wrong. There is some episodes, like in season 3 that we just talked about, where Wesley is more relatable, but at the end of the day, Jake Sisko is a 14-year-old boy, and he plays a 14-year-old boy on a space station,
He plays him extremely well.
and
Yeah.
he gets love from the very first episode to the end.
Well,
And
it
one of the
also
things,
Cisco's a good dad, while Crusher is not exactly a good mother. Um,
and that's just a testament again to we're talking about social commentary. In the 90s,
oh
you
yeah.
did not have prominent single dads that were African Americans treating their kids like Cisco treats his kid. And
Particularly
that was a
African
huge,
American. Yeah.
specifically, yeah, African
Yeah.
Americans. And I've read some of the letters that Avery Brooks has posted publicly about people writing into him and saying, I'm a single dad. I can't tell you how much I look up to you, and you are my inspiration. And if Jake was Wesley and the golden child, who knows if that would have been different.
Well,
He has
I really
flaws.
enjoyed that, because that was actually one of my favorite moments from that documentary. I forgot what that Ira Stephen Bear made.
What we left behind.
What We Left Behind. Thank you. We saw that in theaters. I have a lot of problems with that documentary, because I feel like it's a lot of, thumping their chests because look how progressive we were, and I'm like, no, come on, guys, calm down. But that was actually
They
one moment
were,
in that
but yes.
documentary. That was the one time in that documentary where I was like, you know what, that was really touching. What you guys did there was a good thing. And you know what I think makes that work, Jim? That really makes that work is that they don't call attention to it. I
No.
think if this was modern Trek, they would be like, it's difficult because we're black, and they would go into they would bring it
Race
right
has
to the
nothing to
forefront.
do with it.
And they're just characters, and I'm like, that
Yes.
almost, I think that's a deeper statement than outright making the statement out loud.
Correct. Not bringing attention to it is how you bring attention to it. It's
Yes.
again going back to that subtlety. The political commentary has been there the whole
Mm-hmm.
time,
Always.
but we're not going to throw it in your face. You have to, dig a little bit. And one of the things that I love about Jake is he doesn't join Starfleet,
I knew you were going
and
to bring
he
that up.
still gets love.
Yeah.
His writing career develops genuinely throughout the whole show. It's not all of a sudden he's the best writer ever. And even Cisco calls him out when he reads some of his first stories, and he says, It's got heart, but it's an awful story.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
characters are there or this, but he calls him out. He knows he's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that episode where he says he actually first admits to O'Brien that he doesn't want to join Starfleet. And O'Brien is genuinely shocked. And he says, if that's how you're reacting, how's my dad going to react? And talking about, having these reoccurring characters, O'Brien tells a story that when he was younger, his dad wanted him to be a musician. And he went and joined Starfleet instead. We're talking about love and attention to detail that Star Trek has done in season 3 of TNG. There's an episode with Data in the choir, and if you look in the background of the choir, O'Brien plays a cello.
Oh shit,
This
you're
is
right.
referenced. This
Oh
is
man.
referenced 5 years later
Well, that's what string continuity
that
is.
he was a musician.
Yeah,
and
that's
that he
string
played
continuity.
the cello.
That's string continuity, and that's something that Deep Space Nine does extremely well. Is that one thing will kind of
Yes.
probably a good example of that. String continuity is like a character gets a cherished picture and he hangs it up on a wall, on season 2, episode 12. He hangs a picture up on a wall. I'm just generically doing this. From that time forward, that picture is always on the wall.
Yep.
From that's string continuity, and that's what I think Deep Space Nine doesn't draw, like Cisco's baseball, for example. But yeah,
Cisco's baseball.
Yeah.
When they leave the station and Cisco leaves the baseball on the desk, and the other Cardassians say, "Oh, they must have left this."
No,
and
this is a message.
Goes, no, this is a message. He's coming back.
I love that.
Oh my god.
Chills.
Dukat is another example of a character that gets love. He's not a main character, but he's in a good chunk of them, and he is such a complex character. And Damar is a great character.
Damar's
he only
my
gets
favorite.
love towards the end, but he's such a great character.
Yeah, Damar is an example. Yeah, Damar genuinely shocked me, because I was like, Damar is just going to be the alcoholic, beat him up bad guy, and then they wound up making him
Kira.
Yeah. Which in of itself is interesting, right? Because there's a great line, and I want to say it was in that final season of Deep Space Nine, where in retaliation for what Damar does, the Dominion and the Breen kill something like 40 million Cardassians. Like, it's an obscene number of Cardassians. And Damar is clearly devastated by this. And he's fuming. And you can tell that he's hiding tears, because Cardassians don't cry. And, sorry, that was just a detail from the book that Garrick wrote. They do cry. It's just frowned upon. And he goes, "How could anyone do this?" And Kira goes, "Yeah, Damar, how could anyone do this?" And then they look at each other, and there's no dialogue of him saying, "I get it now." There's none of this. There's no whimsical speech that follows about the morality of war and resistance. They just look at each other, and through acting, you get it. You understand he gets it. She knows he gets it. And now there's a connection between the two of them. And I loved that. That is why I love Deep Space Nine.
You were talking earlier about perfect characters that you love to hate, and the two that come to my mind are Dukat and Kai Wynn.
Oh my god!
Hey,
yeah. Dukat and fucking Kai Wynn.
I'll to hate Kai Wynn.
I'll admit to you, Jim, I don't really care for what they do with Dukat after he has his mental breakdown.
Oh, I agree. I think DS9 falls off at the end. It really does. It's very rushed.
Yes,
and I don't like what happens with Dukat and Kai Wynn at the end. I'm not a huge fan of that. But everything up to like season 6. Love Dukat.
Well, I also want to emphasize that just what happens with Kai Wynn and Dukat, I don't like. I still love seasons 6 and 7 of Deep Space Nine. I really do. It's just that I think their story was extremely rushed, and I think it's because the writers weren't quite sure what to do with them. And I think they even admitted that.
Yeah, but like, if that's the worst thing that we're gonna do to these reoccurring characters is have these two not have a tight-knit story, you got to think about, when you're looking at TNG or the original series or Voyager or really any of these other shows, you got your main crew and you're going to flesh them out and you're going to tidy up their story by the end of it. DS9 has the main crew, then you got Rom and Moogie and the Nagus and
Moogie.
You got cousin Galen, you got the Liquidator Brunt. That's just 6 characters that get rounded out, and that's just Ferengis.
A lot of them played by the same actor.
Oh, don't even get me started on Jeffrey Combs. I would marry that man.
There's that episode of Deep Space Nine where I think they specifically wrote it because they wanted Jeffrey Combs.
3?
They wanted Jeffrey Combs to be all of his characters in Deep Space Nine in one episode and have them in the same room together.
And played 2 or 3 at the same time.
Yeah. And it's hysterical.
Oh, it's great.
It's fantastic.
But that's what I'm saying. that's 6 characters or 5 characters right there, and they all got tight-knit stories by the end of it. And
Hmm.
that's not talking about Nog, that's not talking about Jake, that's not talking about Belial, that's not talking about um we were talking about Eddington in a previous episode.
Fuck yeah,
All of
editing.
these
Yeah.
additional characters get tight, raveled up stories. And that had not happened in Star Trek before then, and it hasn't happened really since then.
Yeah, the only thing, and I think there's a very specific reason why it never really happened to in Star Trek, kind of, until this point, and that's
Well, it's
because
Roddenberry.
TOS and TNG are episodic television shows. They are not telling an overarching story.
Right.
So therefore, your background reoccurring characters aren't really anywhere near as important as a show where there is a giant overarching story and that these people are going to play big parts in. The exception I was going to say is the original 6 movies. I think there are, particularly with Kirk and Spock, that there is an overarching story going on with
Oh
them
yeah,
and character
yeah,
development going on
definitely.
with them. But I think that's one of the reasons why Deep Space Nine was able to thrive with a lot of their side characters, because all the shows have reoccurring side characters, and they're always great. I think my favorite one in a show that's not Deep Space Nine is actually an Enterprise, and ironically, it's also played by Jeffrey Combs.
Shran.
Shran is awesome.
Love Shran.
Shran
Pink
is
skin.
amazing. Yeah, every single
Yeah.
time Shran shows up, I'm like, this is going to be a good episode. and
By the time that I got to Enterprise, I knew I started, really understanding, knowing the actors' names, and anytime I saw Jeffrey Combs, I was like, all right, time to get the popcorn. This is gonna be a
it's
good
going to be good.
episode.
Yeah. He's just
Especially in Enterprise.
yeah. But I think the reason why Deep Space Nine really thrived with their reoccurring characters, just Garrick alone, um, was because of that serialization, the overarching story. They could do something with these
See,
characters.
I think part of the reason that I love, and I don't have like the technical term for it,
Mm,
but when it comes to DS9, the way that I like to say it is it's like 60% episodical, 40% overarching story.
mm,
And that was, no one was really doing that at the time, having this overarching story. And now TV has gone so far that each season is an entire overarching story. And I think DS9 is one of the last, definitely the last Star Trek shows that you can sit down and you can still watch one episode. You'll be missing chunks of it, but you can watch an episode start to finish. You can't do that with Star Trek anymore, and you can't really do that with any show that's coming out in 2024, 2025.
yeah.
And I think that's an art that you need to be able to still make it episodical, but then still have an overarching story. And yeah, there are reoccurring characters like Alexander and Vosh in TNG, but it's nothing like Jake and Nog and Damar and Dukat and all of
Hmm.
them in and
Well, you
Martok,
can. Yeah,
our
I was going
favorite
to
Klingon.
say, yeah, I was actually going to bring that up because in the previous episode we were talking about how season 3 of Star Trek TNG is like the best season of Star Trek anything. There are characters from TNG that get brought over into Deep Space Nine, and they don't get good until Deep Space Nine. One of them being who's what Chancellor Gowron. One of them being Gowron.
Gowron.
Gowron really doesn't get to stretch his legs until Deep Space Nine. Um, and I'm like, this is awesome. Also, I'll fucking say it, and I'm not afraid to admit this. I don't think Worf becomes truly a great character until Deep Space Nine.
Oh, he gets so much love in Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything with him and the House of Moog and Martok and Kern. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing that they really dropped was Alexander.
Oh
He's only
yeah.
in like 3 episodes and he's the laughing stock. But there's like 3 or 4 episodes with Kern. There's a ton with him in Moog.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, Martok. There's a ton with him in Gowron, and of course Jadzia.
I love
All of her
Jadzia.
Klingon relations.
Mm-hmm.
And like he's not even a recurring character. He immediately becomes a mainstay in the show. But like he really technically he was like a continuation of a story that had started in a previous show. And it's like DS9 mastered this. And every time I say 5 or 6 more characters, I take a beat and I think of 5 or 6 more. It's I don't understand how they were able to follow those. All right, let's talk about Odo. Let's talk about Dr. Mora. Let's talk about the female changeling. Let's talk about the other changelings, the changeling that he kills. Like all of these mainstay characters have 4 or 5 or 6 secondary characters that follow their story, but also have their own story. I love everything with Dr. Mora and Odo, and it's only like 3 episodes, but it's all great
It's
because
all of them are great.
of that continued story.
Yeah, and again, it's in Deep Space Nine more than it was in any of the other shows in Star Trek. Yeah, I'd even argue after that. And I love how interconnected all of these side characters are. Like Vosh is only in, for example. Vosh, for example, is only in. Yeah, she's in a couple.
But she's only in 1 episode of DS9. She's in a couple of TNG.
Yes, and her story in TNG doesn't really affect any of the other characters other than Picard, and therefore she doesn't really have much of a mainstay or impact on the show as a whole. All of these characters end up really having a huge impact on part of the show. Look at the Ferengi alone.
Yeah. You got Zach.
Yeah.
Brunt.
You have Brunt. You have Moogie. You have the Grand Nagus.
Zach, yeah. You got Cousin Galen.
Yes.
He makes a couple He comes up a couple times. And let's not even forget about Rom. He eventually basically becomes a main character, but he started out. Oh, and talk about character growth. Rewatching season 1 and 2 of DS9, Rom is an a-hole. Like, he's a true Ferengi, but he doesn't become the Rom that we know and love until like season 3 or 4 when he meets Lita. And that he all of a sudden has respect for women. He all of a sudden starts believing in the Federation and the Federation's values. And Quark does throughout the show too, but Rom really leans into it. And again, he doesn't become like part of the Ferengi Alliance or anything like that. He becomes a station waste manager.
Oh, and
but
I do like
it's
that.
It's still
Yeah.
true to Rom, and it's not like we're shining a spotlight on him, but we know what he's doing when he's not in the episodes because he's station waste manager. Like,
well, I like
that
you
attention
mentioned
to detail.
something too that I think it was your wife Jen who was really impacted by this, but there's a wonderful moment with Jake, and these are just two reoccurring characters, two side even no I'd say Jake was
Oh
a member
yeah,
of the main
I know what
cast,
you're gonna reference.
but
I
Ron,
cried the first time.
Nog was certainly not a main character yet, or not of the main cast yet at this point. He was just a reoccurring character. And Jake starts teaching Nog how to do things, and they start tutoring each other. And I'm like, that is a really beautiful moment that then has a payoff.
Because he eventually joined Starfleet.
Yeah, that's one of the big things, is that a lot of this there's things that pay off that get sort of sprinkled in, and that's one of the benefits of I think it's called backroom writing or back end writing.
Is that where you know the end and you're starting?
It's the opposite.
Or is it opposite?
Yeah, it's the opposite. It's where you don't quite know where your show is going to go, so you develop it as it goes along. And most shows are written that way. Front end writing, yeah, Nagas. Front end writing is where you create everything from the beginning.
Which I feel like shows now are doing that.
Do that a lot. Yeah, that's how they do it.
Again, you got to watch the whole season though. Like, I don't want to have to sit there and watch 15 hours or whatever.
Yeah. But Nog is a fantastic character. I see. I have a hard time talking about Nog because I think he's definitely main cast by season 5 forward. The same with even Garrick. Garrick ends up becoming a part of the show so much come like
Yeah.
season 5 forward, that I'm like, he's basically main cast at that point. Damar, not so much.
No.
Um,
But you got
oh,
other.
what about Cisco's love interest that he ends up falling in
Cassidy.
love? Cassidy,
Cassidy Yates.
which is a huge fucking thing for Cisco, which is one of the things that I really appreciate about Deep Space Nine, is it keeps bringing things up, uncomfortable things up too, like how he lost his wife and
Is it
how
time to move on?
how he wants to move on.
Wait?
He wants to move on, but he feels guilty for it, and I love, and it's very human. A very
And
human
that's
thing to
something
debate.
that they actually touch upon in the very first episode. Is
big time.
when the prophets first talk to Cisco, he keeps bringing them back to when Jennifer died, and they keep saying, "But you live here."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "I don't want to live here, but I have to live here." And then they show him it's time to move on,
Yeah.
not to say forget about her, but it is time to move on and do something with your life. And it's
She
just
helps him with that.
so good.
She
does.
ends up becoming, it was her and Jake, which is what I love about it, is that without Jake he wouldn't have had the balls to move on, and then without Cassidy he would not have been able to move on. It's like Jake
is the one.
Jake gives
that
him the
tells
push to do it.
Gives him the permission.
Cassidy is the change.
Yeah.
And it's brilliantly done. It is absolutely brilliantly done. And Cassidy, which by the way she plays the doctor on the Orville,
yes,
does an amazing job with that role.
One of the things that I've been telling to Jen, and I think it's beginning to make sense to people that start with DS9. DS9 works so well because it's not just a space combat sci-fi show. At the end of the day, it's a drama, and it has all of these relationships, and you want to save them, and none of these characters are perfect. Cassidy Yates is a perfect example. She ends up basically smuggling medicine to the Maquis because she doesn't want to see anyone hurt. She doesn't care who's being hurt, but she ends up breaking the law. And she goes to jail for like 6 months. But Cisco forgives her and still marries her.
Which is a big deal.
She is a good person.
That's a big deal because remember Eddington and how angry Cisco basically poisons an entire planet because he's so angry at Eddington.
For joining the Maquis.
Well, he was always a part of the Maquis.
Well, betraying the uniform. And I think that's why he lets Cassidy get away with it, because she didn't betray her uniform. She's not part of Starfleet.
That could be. Yeah, that very well could be. I don't know.
And she also wasn't supplying weapons. She was supplying medicine. And those are two different things.
Two very different things.
And that's kind of like what's happening now. You look at like Gaza and
there's a lot of there's
Israel.
But like that's just
supply humanitarian aid.
Well, that's just it though, because there's actually a lot to that, because it's very clear that Bajor is Israel. It is very blatantly saying that in the which was formed in the aftermath of World War II, because the Jews had nowhere to go. They had just 6 million of them had just been murdered by a country. Yep. And I'm not going to get into the politics of it or anything like that. That is what happened, and this is clearly what Bajor is, and the historian in me got it instantly, and what they were trying to do, and that amazing episode in season 1 called, I think it's called Duet, where Kira and that, but yes. we shouldn't get into that because that was a main character. I did want to bring this up though. I wanted to bring this up when you mentioned Jake going to O'Brien for some advice, and him saying, "Hey, I don't think I want to join Starfleet." It actually makes perfect sense why he would go to O'Brien, because O'Brien is the only other human father on that show.
Oh, you're right.
Because he has
Molly
Keiko.
is born at that point.
Molly is born at that point. Now? Sorry.
Keiko's pregnant. Now?
Keiko's going to have a baby. Now.
Now. But see, and that started with good tea, nice house.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
seriousness,
Yeah.
but comic relief.
Well, I love that. We really can't
Keiko.
can.
Keiko's another reoccurring character that
That's what I
gets
was. That's what I
love
was
in
trying to get
DS9.
at. That's what I was trying to get at. Is Keiko? She's just the wife in TNG, or the girlfriend or whatever in TNG because they're not married yet
Yeah,
in TNG.
they get married in TNG.
And then I love the whole debate that Keiko gets in, where it's like, I don't want to live on Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine is a shithole, and yet
It's
over the
she doesn't want
course
to
of
raise Molly
yeah,
there either.
But as the show goes along, kind of like Cisco in many ways, as the show goes along, since she realized, no, this is home.
This is home.
This is home. Deep Space Nine is my home, and I love that. I absolutely
so
love that.
good.
Yeah.
It's just all so good. I love all of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Cardassians and we're talking about Dukat. We started off with Garrick, but
Mm.
I didn't realize this. Tane is who we learn to be as his father
Mm-hmm.
is in season 2.
Yes.
That's how
Yep.
early Tane is on screen. And yeah, we don't really see him until like season 4 or 5, but it's the same actor and it's the same story, and he remembers what Odo did all the way back in season 2.
What about that Cardassian that Kira really starts caring for? That she's kind of like a
Yes,
surrogate father.
I am literally like 3 episodes behind that,
Mm-hmm.
and I am dying for Jen to see that.
It's amazing.
Kira and Stubborn Old Men is the that is the best episodes.
Yeah.
And he is in, I think, 2 or 3 in
Mm-hmm.
total. And it's just like he could have been a throwaway character, but they brought him back and then again. And then they killed him. But at that point, we care about him. Kira cares about him. That's
Mm-hmm.
her dad dying again for the
And
second time.
he's a Cardassian, and that is a huge thing because and something that I think is really, if you're going to have your recurring, it's only natural for a show to have recurring characters, right? The best reoccurring characters, in my humble opinion, aren't just good characters in of themselves, though that is definitely a plus. The best reoccurring characters bring about character change and development for your main cast.
I just remembered something about him.
Oh no.
In the first episode that he's in, he because he thinks that she's actually his daughter,
Yes.
he gives her a bracelet. In the episode that he dies, she's wearing that bracelet,
Despite her being upset with him.
pissed off at him. And
Yes.
well, she ends up taking it off, and that's the
Yeah.
symbolism for like, I don't care about you. But
Mhm.
then at the end of the episode, she puts it back on, and she is with him as
Yeah.
he inevitably passes. And it's like you said, that string theory. She doesn't wear it in every episode, and of course she's only going to wear it during that episode. But like to remember that small detail, and then it also helps the viewer because then the viewer says, "Hey, I remember that. I don't remember why, but yeah, they have a connection." And when you watch the show as many times as I have, you remember those small details even more, and that commitment is what makes DS9 so good. You have all
On
of
all
these
of them.
little stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally, I think just about every side character that appears in more than one episode is good. They do things with them, or they progress, as I said earlier. They progress the character development of the main cast.
Yeah. They
Can we talk about that episode? You wouldn't understand this, but I get this. The and I say that because you're not a big fan of TOS. There's that episode where Jadzia helps out those 3 Klingons.
Oh, I just watched it. I love that episode.
Yeah, those 3 Klingons are from TOS.
I've gathered that.
Yeah,
And
they all
worked
appear
with
on
Curzon
TOS. Yeah,
And
yeah.
Um, I think they even mentioned Kirk,
Yes.
like by name, and so I knew it was from TOS. But like those characters, the one that survives at the end, I think he does come back in one more episode, and that is the kicking off point for Jadzia to say, "I like Klingons," but not just because Curzon likes Klingons, but because Jadzia likes Klingons too.
Which is again, it goes into my point. The best side characters, the best reoccurring
Yeah,
characters, are the ones that progress the character development and the story of your main cast.
I agree.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. They are supporting characters. You know.
And then they come back and they
Mm-hmm.
support more and
Mm-hmm.
more. And sometimes they undermine what we thought we knew about a character, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it enforces it more.
Eddington, I think, is the best example of undermining.
But yeah, I liked
Because
Eddington.
he brings Cisco into a very dark place. So by the time we get to the episode in the Pale Moonlight, where he teams up with Garrick, suddenly we're not as surprised by it because of what Eddington did to him, and I love it. I love the fact that Cisco has a really dark side and stuff like that. This is
But
fascinating.
it
You're
shows
right.
that he's real.
Yes,
He
very much
lets his
so.
ego get ahead
Yeah.
of him, whereas Picard would never have that happen.
I don't know if it's his ego, but it's certainly
No, it's
it's
100% his ego. He can't be bested by Eddington. He has
see.
to be better.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I didn't. Because the reason why I brought that up is because I'm like, I don't think it's him. It's the fact that he was bested by Eddington. It was more Eddington betrayed him. It was an insult to
He didn't
him.
just betray the uniform, he
Yeah.
betrayed
He
Cisco.
betrayed Cisco. Yeah, yeah. Which, you know what? That is ego. You're right. You're 100% right. That is what it is.
But even him is a perfect example too of he got a nice story. You know,
Mhm.
he's in like 10 or 12 episodes and it's spread out over the course of like 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And in that last episode, he does kill himself. Excuse me, he kills himself
Oh,
to
it's the
save
noble.
others.
Yeah, it's the noble
He
sacrifice.
really was Jean Valjean.
Well, Jim, it's been over 30 minutes. We got to start wrapping this episode up.
So then I have one last recurring character that we have to talk about.
Yes.
And it's not even going to be talking about it. Where's Morn?
Where the hell's Morn? Yeah.
Where's Morn?
Morn
That
is the
is
rock
Jen's favorite thing to do. He's in every single episode. Where's Morn?
Morn is the rock that holds Deep Space Nine together. Let's face it.
He doesn't have a single line in all of Deep Space Nine, and he's in every single episode.
There's a funny episode. It's not funny, but it is funny because there's an episode where they think he's dead.
It is a funny episode, actually.
And suddenly they're like, oh my God.
This character that has never talked, never had a single line. He's always in the background. And he got a whole episode dedicated to him, and he's not even in the episode.
Yeah, yeah, he's
Talk
not
about
even in the
recurring
episode.
characters that get love.
It's so funny. It is so funny. Oh my God, the one where he's being interrogated.
I wanted to end on Morn.
He freaking gets interrogated by this guy, and it just hard cuts to him.
Yeah, we both just did it. I actually know what episode it is. It's when Bashir gets he gets like the scan to become the next EMH.
Yes.
And they find out that he's genetically altered, and they're manipulated. All of them.
Reoccurring characters. Genetically, yeah.
He eventually becomes the EMH in Voyager.
Yeah.
Lita.
Well, no. I was gonna say those other genetically altered or engineered.
I
kids.
love them. It's such. Again, it's not in your face, but it's just a analogy for like autism or being on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Amazing. But they don't make them to seem like they're less than anybody. They're actually smarter than everybody.
In certain ways.
Because they focus on one thing.
Yeah.
They're able to excel in that one thing. And all of these recurring characters are just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah.
Deep Space Nine. That's all I
Nine.
have to say about that.
That's all I got to say about that. But yeah, Deep Space Nine, I agree. I think out of all of the shows, it has the best group of reoccurring characters, and especially with their impact on the show
The
itself.
main characters,
As
yeah.
much as I love Shran,
Oh,
this is a good episode.
I could do this again. We could do a
We
recurring
could do
characters
we could
part
do
two.
we could do another just on Deep Space Nine.
Literally, every
Right?
time I name off 5 characters, I think of
Yeah.
another one that's got at least 2 or 3 episodes.
I agree.
I think this is a good place to call it, though.
Yeah, this is a good place to call it. Yeah, I love Deep Space Nine so much.
Love Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I love Deep Space Nine. Well, Jim, it's your episode. Time to wrap it up, man. Go.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching yet another episode of Welcome to 10 Forward. I love Deep Space Nine. I hope you guys love it just as much as I do. I don't really have any channels to pimp myself out, but I'm looking forward to the next episode that we do on Welcome to 10 Forward. So I'll see you then. And Adam, thanks for having me on the show again.
Absolutely. You are my co-host after all. So, see you later.
I mean,
Okay.
and you gotta leave that awkward pause. Like,
Yeah.
it's not
Oh,
a-
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm leaving that. That's staying in. So yeah, this is a good place to wrap for the night. And we of course can meet up again. It doesn't have to be live. I just know that it was time for A&P Live, and I wanted to kill two birds with one stone.
I love talking Trek, so anytime, seriously.
It feels good. I haven't talked about Star Trek with anybody like this for a while. So yeah, it's been pretty good. I think we made the right decision not talking about the Breen.
Yeah, but like I said, we'll change the topic to just be what species we would like to get.
Would like to
more.
see more of, because the Breen would certainly be on there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'd say it's time to wrap up this live stream as a whole. So, Jimmy, I know we just said goodbyes, so we don't really need to do it again because we just said our goodbyes. But, dude, thank you so much for joining. This was a lot of fun. Not a good audience tonight whatsoever, but I don't care. This was fun.
Sometimes it's just fun.
Yeah.
And you got an excuse to get a write-off to get a new shirt.
Yeah, I totally did. I totally did get an excuse to get a write-off for this. It's good to have you on our show, Jim. Rare to actually just have you alone on one of my live streams. So yeah, it's always a pleasure doing that. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. The few of you that were here, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you guys later. Peace out.